came through at 6 a.m. A scratchy Vox transmission, clipped and choked by static like it had been punched through a sandstorm of broken souls. It wasn't the words that chilled us, it was the voice. General Traven's voice. General Traven had been dead for 2 weeks. We all knew it. Every man and woman in the 144th Lemurian Infantry knew it. We'd watched his command bastion take a direct hit from an orbital lance strike during the opening bombardments. The whole sky had lit up like Emperor's wrath made manifest, and we'd seen the command tower disintegrate like chalk under a hammer. There hadn't been anything left to recover, just ash and boiling mud. So when the Vox operator flinched and said, "It's the general," we thought it was a sick joke, until we heard the voice, until he spoke. All units of the 144th. Defensive line is no longer viable. Advance to grid sectors 19-Delta-Obsidian. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die. For the throne. For Lemuria. Obedience is salvation. The voice was wrong. Not in content, but in rhythm. It was like listening to a memory, cracked and half-warped by time. There was no background noise, no shifting of paper, no Vox hum, just a perfectly isolated voice, speaking with a coldness that we'd never heard from Traven when he was alive. And it kept repeating, every 5 minutes, exactly the same phrasing, exactly the same flat tone. We timed it. None of us moved for the first hour. Lieutenant Varys paced the trench like a man with his own execution papers sealed and stamped in his hand. The mud pulled at his boots with each step, sucking, gurgling, the same way it had swallowed Keller 2 days before when a shell hit the forward lip of the trench and turned the ground to liquefied stone. He'd vanished in seconds, screamed for a bit, then silence. "I'm not taking my men into Obsidian Sector," Varys muttered for the 50th time. "That's warp-touched ground, no maps of the terrain, no logistics, no trench lines, no support." Corporal Dreb, the Vox operator, sat like a statue beside the set. His fingers trembled when he reloaded the power cell. His lips moved silently each time the general's voice came through. I watched him start mouthing the words. By the third loop of the broadcast, he had them memorized. So did I. "Advance to grid sectors 19-Delta-Obsidian. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die." We all knew what it meant. The line was broken. We were being sent into a kill zone. But none of us questioned the order aloud. Not yet. Because the moment you start questioning the chain of command out here, this deep into a forgotten war on a planet no one can pronounce, you become aware of how alone you really are. And the truth is, you're not supposed to survive long enough to think about it. By 6:15, Varys gathered us around the field table. A map was unrolled. Oil-stained, curling at the edges, covered in scribbled notes and outdated tactical overlays. Obsidian Sector wasn't even on it. There was a black square labelled Unsurveyed. That was all. "There's nothing there," Sergeant Cale growled. "It's dead ground, swamp and fog. Place eats Vox signals and patrols. And now we're supposed to take it," said Guardsman Rennick, based on the voice of a corpse. Varys didn't answer. He didn't have to. The Vox behind us answered for him. "You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die." We stared at one another for a long time. A silence built between us, full of thoughts none of us dared speak. We all heard the unspoken question crawling up through our throats like a slug of cold mud. If the general's dead, who's giving the orders? The sky hadn't changed for days. It was always some shade of bruised grey, lit faintly from below by artillery flashes. The sun here didn't shine. It pulsed, a sickly red heartbeat behind the clouds, like something dying in the atmosphere, dragging the light down with it. At 6:30, the order was repeated again, but this time, there was something new. A second voice, just a whisper, layered behind the general's words. We couldn't catch the exact phrasing, but Dreb swore he heard it say, "We see you." He unplugged the Vox and stood up so fast he knocked over the unit. "Something's wrong. That's not just a replay. That's something else. It's not human." "Then why did you salute?" I asked quietly. He froze. So did I, because I hadn't even meant to say that. But I'd seen it. When the transmission played, Dreb's hand went up, just for a second, reflexive, like muscle memory. He saluted the voice. So had Sergeant Cale. We didn't talk after that. We began the march into Obsidian Sector at 700 hours. 2 squads, 17 men, 5 laser guns with full charges, 2 autoguns, 1 with a cracked housing, a single grenade with no pin, taped in place with ration foil. We called it the Blessing. Morale was a joke by then. Kale took point. Dreb stayed at the rear, carrying the portable Vox on his back, trailing a thin line of wire that vanished into the trench mist. The moment we left the mapped zone, it felt like crossing into another reality. Fog clung to the mud like cobwebs made of smoke. The ground pulsed when you stepped wrong, like something beneath the soil was breathing. There were no birds, no insects, just the soft, distant sound of boots squelching through the same muck we walked in. But the sound didn't come from us. At 7:30 a.m., Private Grinnell vanished. 1 second he was beside me, mud up to his knees, whispering a litany to keep his hands steady. The next moment, he was gone. No scream, no splash, just absence. I looked down. There were still boot prints in the muck beside mine, but no footprints leading away, just one set, like he'd never moved at all, like the mud itself had eaten him. Varys ordered us to keep moving. We did, but no one spoke after that. 8 a.m. The Vox crackled to life again. This time, the voice was clearer than ever. General Traven, confirming movement of squads into Obsidian Sector. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die. Then silence. Then a different voice entirely. Good. It wasn't a voice from the Vox. It came from the trees. Except there were no trees in Obsidian. Just mud, just fog, just us. I looked at Kale. He looked at me. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. We're not following orders anymore. We're being guided. By 8:15, we found a bunker, not listed on any maps, built in the style of the Munitorum, but old, too old, rusted, half sunk into the earth, sealed with an iron hatch covered in purity seals that had long since rotted into unreadable ribbons. But the door was open, and inside, the Vox was already playing before we even stepped in. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die. The mud was screaming again. It wasn't the sound of boots pulling free of sucking earth. It wasn't the slosh of water over unstable rock. It was voices, high and low, old and childlike, layered together like rotting chords in a broken hymn. Some were pleading, some were laughing, some just gasped, but they were all in the mud. Sergeant Kale froze mid-step. His boot sank halfway to the knee. He yanked at it, cursing. But the scream from beneath him rose in pitch, sharp, panicked, as if he were standing on a living throat. Rennick fell backward, trying to help, and when his hand slammed into the sludge, he jerked back like he touched a hot pipe. I felt a face, he whispered. A face. We were only 20 minutes into the advance. Already we'd lost Grinnell without a trace, seen fog that moved against the wind, and heard General Traven dead for 2 weeks, giving us our marching orders from a bunker that shouldn't exist. Now the ground itself was crying out. Kale finally ripped free of the earth. Steam hissed from his boot like the soil was exhaling. The Vox on Dreb's back clicked on again without warning. No static this time, just that same flat tone. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die. Then, again, behind the general's words, something layered, a whisper, a voice just one tone off from his, almost like an echo, except it didn't match the rhythm. It spoke after the general, software intimate. We're beneath you. Corporal Dreb stared at the Vox unit. No signal, he muttered, no channel open. There's no input at all. We were in a dead zone. No relays, no repeaters, no link to high command. And yet the Vox kept talking, and it was always from ahead of us. By 7:20, we stopped trying to walk in formation. The trench line was gone. This far into Obsidian, there was no infrastructure, just mounds of sunken earth, half-flooded bunkers buried in wet silence, and thorned wire that sprouted from the ground like veins. Kale, Rennick, myself, Dreb, Lieutenant Varys, and 6 others pressed forward into the greyscape. I caught myself counting us every 2 minutes, not on purpose. It was like some part of me expected people to vanish. At 7:22, someone did. Guardsman Pellis. 1 second he was mid-sentence, breathing heavily and complaining about the mud burning his legs. Next second, the sound cut, like someone had sliced out his presence. No scream, no splash, just silence. Varys whirled around. "Pellus!" he shouted. No answer. We retraced our steps. There was a melted imprint in the mud, the shape of a laser gun, no hands, just an impression, as if the weapon had lain there for 1,000 years and decayed into the earth. Rennick started praying aloud after that. No one stopped him. 7:30. We found a crater filled with corpses, but none of them were ours. They wore uniforms we didn't recognize. Not even the Munitorum cog seals matched. They were yellowed, bone white. Their gear was rusted solid. No signs of death by lass or blade. They drowned, all of them. Mouths stretched open, filled with mud. Fingernails clawed bloody against their own throats. One had his head smashed in by the butt of his own rifle. They weren't shot, Cale whispered. They chose to go like this. Someone asked why. We didn't answer, but the screaming in the mud got louder. At 7:35, we saw movement behind us. Something tall, something slow. We turned. Nothing was there, but Rennick insisted. He swore he saw a silhouette, not a soldier, not a machine, something draped in shadow that moved without sinking into the mud. Walked right over it, he said. Didn't even leave a ripple. No one argued. 10 minutes later, the fog turned dark. Not grey, not thick, dark. It wasn't like nightfall. It was absence. A patch of fog so black it looked like a wound in the world. Cale tossed a flare into it. The light vanished before it touched the ground. Then came the sound, deep and wet and distant, like bones being crushed underwater. The flare landed outside the black, but it was bent, melted, twisted in a spiral that shouldn't be possible. We turned and walked. No one looked back. 7:50. We reached the edge of the obsidian ridge, a long plateau of blackened stone, pitted with craters, ringed with rusted shells and shattered bunkers like broken teeth. Beyond it lay the bunker we'd seen before, half submerged, door wide open, but now it looked different. It was lit from within. Faint yellow light spilled out across the mud, flickering like a candle. And the screaming stopped. All at once, we didn't feel relief. We felt watched. The Vox crackled once more, but this time it didn't play Traven's voice. It played ours, recordings of us from minutes ago. Rennick's prayer, Cale's whisper, Dreb's log entry, all chopped up and reassembled, played back out of order, like something inside the Vox was stitching together a new sentence. Hold the trench, scream, for Lemuria, we're beneath you. Then silence, then the sound of breathing, slow, raspy, right next to the unit. Dreb dropped the Vox. We didn't pick it up. 7:58. The ground vibrated, a distant impact, not artillery, not orbital, something below, a long tremor, as if the planet itself was shifting in its grave. The mud near Cale began to boil. He backed up, fast, but something reached out, a hand, wrought black. Fingers fused into claws, wrapped in strands of regimental cloth from our own unit. We opened fire. Last shots ripped through the muck. No blood, no splash, just a ripple. Then stillness. The hand was gone, but the shape of it remained, pressed into the mud, like it was burned there. 7:59. We reached the bunker entrance, light flickering inside, stale air pushing out. The walls were covered in script, etched into rust. Lines of prayer, smeared in blood, some fresh, some hundreds of years old. One message repeated, you will hold that line, even in death, especially in death. Varys stepped forward. He didn't hesitate. He walked inside. We followed. The door closed behind us on its own, and the mud began screaming again. The door closed behind us. We didn't touch it, didn't hear a click, just felt the shift in pressure, like the bunker exhaled and sealed us in. No one spoke, not even Varys. For the first few seconds, we simply stood in the low, flickering light, waiting for our eyes to adjust, for our thoughts to catch up, for the screaming mud outside to fade in our minds. It didn't. Even inside, with the thick adamantium walls pressing around us, it echoed. The mud was screaming inside our heads now. The interior of the bunker was impossibly large. From the outside, it had looked like a small outpost, maybe a forward listening post or abandoned signal relay. Inside it was a cathedral, twisted, narrow, dark, yet stretching on farther than logic allowed. The air reeked of rust, oil and sweat. Fresh sweat. Not rot, not age. Fresh. Corporal Dreb checked the Vox. "No contact," he said after a moment, voice shaking. "No outbound signal. No return ping. It's like we're underground." "We're not," said Cale, glancing at the rusted ceiling, "but something wants us to think we are." We moved in 2 teams. Varys led point with Cale and Rennick. I stayed with Dreb and 2 others, Vig and Law. No one wanted to be alone. The corridors split off from the main chamber like veins, organic curves rather than sharp angles. Not standard Imperial design. The walls pulsed faintly under our torchlight. Metal, yes, but warped, almost as if they'd grown. There were doors every 20 meters, heavy, unmarked, some slightly ajar. We didn't open them. 8:10. The Vox unit flickered again, not with sound, but with movement. The dials rotated, randomly, frequencies sliding back and forth like someone was spinning the tuner from inside. Dreb yanked the pack off and opened the access panel. "No power," he whispered. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The battery's disconnected, the whole circuit's dead." We all looked at the unit, then at each other. Then we kept moving, because not moving was worse. 8:15. Varys's team found a door that wasn't rusted. It was newer, grey steel bolted from the outside. There was a sigil on it, not one any of us recognized. Rennick said it looked like a symbol for breath. Varys said it looked like a lock. Cale knocked once. The sound rang down the corridor like a gunshot. Then silence, then a click. Not from the door, from the Vox. 8:16. It began speaking again, but not the general. It was a child, a young girl's voice. Software, timid, unnatural in the silence of the metal corridors. "We were told to wait here." He said the stars would blink first. "Have they blinked?" Dreb dropped the Vox again. "Shut it off," Cale snapped. "I can't," Dreb whispered. "It's not even on." 8:20. Law began to hum. At first we thought he was trying to drown out the static, but after a few seconds, we realized something was wrong. He wasn't choosing to hum. He wasn't aware of it. He walked at the back of the group, torch angled low, lips vibrating to a melody none of us knew. Not a hymn, not a marching tune. Just noise, almost insect-like, chittering. I tapped his shoulder. He turned and smiled, but the smile wasn't his. It was too wide, too dry. "Everything is being remembered," he said. Then his nose began to bleed. 8:25. Varys ordered us into a room off the main corridor, a planning chamber, or it had been once. Hollow table in the center, burned out. Walls lined with display screens that still bled flickering images, troop movements, names, requests for reinforcement, most dated over 600 years ago, but one message kept blinking on repeat. Obsidian sector, reinforcement denied, over and over and over. The request timestamps kept changing. They weren't old, they were updating. Dreb's face went white. "These are from today." Varys looked at the timestamp. It read 8:25, request denied, 8:26, request denied, 8:27, request denied. We weren't just seeing echoes. The bunker was reacting. 8:30, we heard footsteps, multiple sets, running, panic. From somewhere deeper in the halls, Varys signaled silence. We crouched, waited, no breath, no cough. We waited. The sound stopped just outside our chamber. But when we opened the door, no one was there, except for a helmet. Standard Lemurian 144th issue, sitting upright, clean, polished, and a note inside it, written in fresh ink. "You arrived too late, 8:40. We decided to backtrack. Every step back the way we'd come took longer than it should. Hallways stretched, doors shifted. Marks we'd carved in the rust were gone." Rennick's breathing quickened. Cale held the squad steady. Then Vig screamed. He was pointing at the wall. A section had peeled back. Rust flaking off like shedding skin. And behind it, buried in the structure, was a face, mummified. Eyes wide open, mouth agape. Metal tubes jammed into its neck. It was still breathing. And worse, we recognized it. General Traven. Dreb collapsed. Not from shock, but from pain. He clutched his head and screamed like something inside him was uncoiling. Blood leaked from his ears. His lips moved rapidly, whispering fragments of the general's orders, blended with the child's voice and something deeper. I leaned down. He grabbed my wrist with white-knuckle force. "There is no surface," he rasped. "There's no up, only in." 8:55. The lights began to fail, not go out, but flicker in patterns, flashing like Morse, pulsing in steady beats. Dreb stared at them. "I know this," he said. He started tapping back, finger to floor, metal to code. Kale tried to stop him. Too late. The Vox exploded with noise. Not words, not signals, just the sound of breathing. Hundreds of voices, all overlapping, all gasping in sync. Then one broke through. "You are not receiving this message." And then, "You were never meant to leave." 9 a.m. The door we entered through was gone, not sealed, not blocked, gone, replaced by smooth, seamless metal. No sign it had ever been there. We turned back toward the main corridor and found ourselves facing the same bunker entrance again. Same note in the helmet, same blinking map. The cycle had restarted, but now the Vox was quiet, and the mud outside had stopped screaming, because it was inside now. We had no map for this place, but worse, the maps we did have were lying. Varys laid the tactical parchment out on the floor again, oil-stained, torn at the edges, still marked with our current position: Obsidian Sector, Sector 19-Delta, grid overlays in thick black ink, retreat lines, contingency zones. But the room we stood in, the same room we'd entered, left and somehow entered again, was not on any layer of the parchment. Neither was the corridor behind it, or the circular passage leading to the planning chamber, or the dead ends we'd checked twice that suddenly weren't dead ends anymore. Kale placed a finger on the corner of the map. "Right here," he muttered. "Should be Command Relay Alpha, 40 paces east of the Obsidian approach ridge. We've been walking for nearly 100. Rennick shook his head. "No," he whispered. "We haven't moved at all." And he was right. When I looked down, my own boot prints made 20 minutes ago were still fresh in the muck-stained corridor behind us, smudged slightly, but there, exactly where I'd stepped before. We were walking in a loop, but the rooms weren't staying the same. 9:05. Dreb's Vox unit began to glow, not flicker, glow, with a deep red backlight none of us had seen before. He didn't touch it, didn't even move, just stared. "It's navigating," he said. We gathered around. The screen showed no signal, no channel, just a dot, moving, and a line, red, twisting away from the dot, stretching out, then vanishing into static at the edge. "What is that?" Kale asked. Dreb answered without blinking. "It's where we're supposed to go." "According to what?" Varys said coldly. "The bunker," Dreb said. "It wants us to see it." No one laughed, because we all felt it. That crawling sense beneath the skin that we were being watched, that we were walking inside something's lungs. 9:15. Law stopped moving. He stared at a corner where two walls met, his laser limp in his hand. The shadows there were deeper than they should have been, too thick, too quiet. I turned to call him back, and the shadow moved, not like something stepped out, more like the walls folded inward, dragging Law's shape with them. He vanished with a shudder of metal and a wet snapping noise. Gone. No scream. Only his humming remained, just for a few seconds. Then silence. We no longer said each other's names. Names had power, and power drew attention. 9:20. The map on the floor changed. No one touched it. No one marked it. But the ink twisted. The overlays began to flicker like they were reacting to heat, and new lines appeared, pulsing red. Like veins, they led deeper into Obsidian, and at the center of the network, at a point marked with a blinking triangle, was a label, one none of us had written. "Heart. Someone's mocking us," Kale said, too loud. "No," whispered Rennick, eyes wide. "Someone wants us to find it." 9:25. The lights pulsed again, same Morse pattern, but now the flashes were faster. 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. We recognized it this time. Distress code. Trapped, repeat, trapped, from the bunker itself. We walked, because what else could we do? The corridors narrowed, sloped downward. The rust turned to something else. Dark stone. Black, veined with dull silver, warm to the touch. Not a material we recognized. Not ferrocrete, not ceramite, organic. Cale cut a strip off it, held it to his nose. Blood, it smelled like blood. We stopped touching the walls after that. 9:30, we found another door. This one breathed, not metaphorically. We watched it move, in and out, subtle, rhythmic, alive. Dreb touched it with the butt of his rifle. The door shivered, then hissed open. Behind it, rows of Vox units, hundreds, stacked to the ceiling, all blinking, all on, and each one, each single one, was playing our own voices. You will hold that line. You will hold it until you die. We are beneath you. We are inside. The walls shook with the noise, a chorus of fractured echoes. Cale stepped forward and shouted, "Shut it off!" Every single unit stopped at once, except one, the last unit on the far wall. It clicked and played a new voice. Mine. You never left. 9:35. We tried to destroy the Vox units. Rennick grabbed a crowbar and smashed 3 of them in a row. They exploded into sparks and dust, but the next row lit up immediately. The lights weren't blinking anymore. They were watching. Varys gave the order, "Move." We ran. 9:40. We hit a junction with 4 passageways, all identical, all flickering with failing light. Dreb held the Vox like a divining rod. It beeped once, then again, each time facing a different path. "They all lead to the same place," he said, pale. "How do you know?" I asked. He didn't answer, but the red dot on the screen kept moving, no matter which way we faced, and the word on the screen changed, not heart. Now it said MOUTH. 9:50. The corridors began to breathe. Walls expanded and contracted. The air grew thick, wet, like it had lungs. We couldn't tell if we were walking through a structure or through something's throat. The humming returned. Now we were all humming, not by choice. It came up through our boots, buzzing into the bones, gnawing into our spines. Rennick tried to cover his ears. It didn't stop. He screamed, fell, blood from his nose, ears, eyes. Cale lifted him, dragged him back up, but Rennick looked at us with hollow eyes and mouthed, "I saw it." 9:55. Dreb's Vox went dead, completely. No lights, no beeps, no screen, just black. But still we heard it. In our ears, in the metal, in the walls. The bunker was talking to us now. No devices, just sound and shadow and memory. One last whisper echoed through the halls. "There are no maps here, only choices." We didn't speak again, because now we weren't sure whose voices we were using. 10 o'clock. We reached another door, carved in symbols that bled, written in ink that smoked. Above it, not painted, but grown into the metal, was a sentence, "You are the line now." Varys reached for the handle, paused, then turned to us. "This is the last one," he said. He didn't say how he knew, but we believed him, because everything behind us was gone. No corridor, no junction, no bunker, just fog and breathing walls, and the memory of maps we couldn't trust. The handle turned like it had been waiting. No rust, no resistance, just a smooth, silent click that made the walls shudder. Then, quiet, no breathing, no screaming mud, no distorted Vox playback, just that deep silence you only hear before something terrible starts. Varys didn't wait. He opened the door. What lay beyond wasn't a corridor, it was a chasm. The floor dropped into darkness, steep and endless, shaped not by design, but by erosion, like something had burrowed through the heart of the bunker and left its skeleton behind. The drop was hundreds of meters deep, maybe more. Faint metal platforms clung to the edges, scaffolded walkways strung like broken ribs across the void. And far below, so far it made our eyes ache to focus, was a light, pale, blue-white, pulsing slowly, like a heart or a flare. Cale stepped forward first, testing the scaffold with one boot. It held, barely. Rusted, yes, but strong beneath the decay. He waved us on. One by one we crossed. We didn't look down. You couldn't, not for long, because when you stared too deep into the pit, the light at the bottom seemed to move. It pulsed faster, then slower, then it blinked once. Dreb stopped mid-step, whispered, "It sees us." 10:10. We reached the first landing, a small outcropping halfway down. It looked like it had once held a watch post, small bunker slits, a broken turret mount, a charred picked slate still fused to the wall. Inside lay a body, fresh, too fresh. Uniform, Lemurian 144th. Serial tag, unreadable, melted into the flak vest. But we recognized the face, Private Kellin. Dead in the first week of deployment. Shell impact to the chest. We buried him outside trench 9-east with full rights. But here he was again, clean, unrotted, eyes open, mouth gaping. He wasn't breathing. But when we checked the picked slate, the last image showed our entire squad standing around his grave, but none of us remembered taking it. And in the image, we were all looking at the camera, 10:20. The walkways narrowed, some missing rails, some crumbling beneath our weight. Varys didn't slow down. He kept his eyes on the pulse light below. It was closer now, brighter. Rennick muttered under his breath, something about the light being backwards. What does that mean? Cale snapped. It's moving upward, Rennick replied, pointing. It's not light falling into darkness. It's darkness being pulled toward the light. We didn't ask what he meant. We couldn't, because the light at the bottom, it blinked again, and this time, so did Varys. He stumbled, one hand to his temple, fell to a knee. We rushed to him. His eyes had rolled back, blood running from his nose. He whispered something through clenched teeth. He died before the flare landed. What? Cale said. Varys shook his head violently. The flare, we fired it. He was dead before it touched the ground. He's still dead. He's waiting, but the flare hasn't landed. Then he passed out. 10:30. We carried him down. Two of us, Cale and I, held his arms. Dreb took point. The flare at the bottom pulsed faster, brighter. So bright now that we could see the shadows it cast on the walls above. They moved before we did. Not reflections, not tricks of the torchlight. Shadows with limbs too long. Heads split down the middle. Eyes in the center of their chests. They mimicked our steps, and sometimes didn't. 10:35. Dreb stopped cold. There, he said, pointing to a ledge above us. Another body, another 144th Lemurian. Same gear, same tags, same face as Varys. But he had a flare in his hand, unlit. And the date on the survival slate next to him read, logged, 3 hours from now. Cale read it twice. No way, this can't be right. That's our officer, that's... And then the flare at the bottom blinked again. Once, twice, then stayed dark. 10:40, silence. Even the walls had gone still. The scaffolds ended. A final rusted platform led to a platform of pitch-black glass. Wide, circular, covered in Vox units. But they weren't playing, they were listening. Their dials moved with our voices, spinning, tracking pitch, pattern. A voice came through, not the general, not the girl. It was ourselves, all of us, our own speech looped and warped. We held the line. We never left. He died before the flare landed. 10:50. Varys awoke. He stood up without help, eyes blank. He walked forward without a word, stopped at the center of the glass floor, knelt, and whispered, I understand now. We weren't supposed to survive. We weren't supposed to die either. We were supposed to witness. He lit the flare. It rose upward, not down, defying gravity, climbing into the void above. The darkness pulled away from it. And as it rose, we saw what had been waiting at the bottom all along. It wasn't a creature. It was a memory of every man we lost, every voice we forgot, every promise command made and abandoned. They were all here, woven into the walls, carved into the scaffolds, screaming in the mud, watching through the shadows. The bunker was a record, a monument to forgotten soldiers. And we had entered the archive. 10:55. The flare finally stopped rising. It hovered, frozen in air. And then, with a final flicker, it played one last image, projected into the darkness above. It was us, all of us, dead, lying in the mud, staring upward. The timestamp, 6 hours ago. The caption, this is where you were always going to die. We stayed frozen long after the image faded. The flare still hovered above us, weightless, flickering with unnatural calm. It cast no warmth, Only pale light that bled across the floor like spilled milk in a morgue. None of us spoke, not even Varys, because in that moment, every single one of us saw something we'd never admit aloud. Our own bodies, lying in the mud, faces slack, eyes wide, not imagined, not distorted, dead, before the order was ever given, before the march into Obsidian Sector, before the Vox had ever spoken, and somehow, we were still here, 11:10. Dreb reached for the Vox again. It clicked on without his hand touching the receiver. The screen displayed nothing, no signal, no channel, just a single word, blinking in slow rhythm. "He's here." "Who?" Kale whispered. No one answered, but we knew, because a new sound began to rise through the bunker. Boots, marching, slow, steady, dozens of them. But they didn't echo. Varys stepped away from us. He didn't look back, didn't raise his weapon. He simply walked toward the sound like it was calling him home. And then we saw them. Marching up from the lower vaults through the archways of steel and bone came a column of black uniformed men. Commissariat coats, tall caps, cold eyes. But they weren't walking, not truly. Their limbs moved with intent, but not with life. There was no breath, no heat, and their faces. Each one had a mouth sewn shut. Each one's eyes were clouded with dust, their skin bloated, stiff, corpses. Kale leveled his laser gun. "Back!" he hissed, but the column didn't break formation. At the head of the procession walked a single figure. His coat bore the seal of the Imperium. His shoulder pauldron was marked in red wax. A commissar, our commissar, Commissar Halbrecht, last seen torn in half by artillery fire at Hive Station Caltron. I saw it happen. I carried what was left of him back, but here he was, whole, unburned, unblinking, and talking. He addressed the corpses behind him, not in command, not in rage, but in conversation, like an officer giving his men encouragement before a parade review. "You'll find it easier now," he said to no one. "The screaming stopped, the orders are clear, you died well, and that's all that's ever mattered." We stood in silence. Dreb dropped his Vox again. This time it shattered. 11:20. Halbrecht turned to face us. His expression didn't change, but we could feel it behind his stitched lips, a smile. "You've come to join us," he said, "or you already have." His voice wasn't human. It was a mix of every tone we'd heard since entering the bunker. The general, the child, our own, all laced together. "You died before the flare landed," Kale whispered. Halbrecht nodded. "That's how this place works." We raised our weapons. The corpses didn't flinch. Halbrecht stepped forward. Behind him, one of the marching dead spoke, not with lips. They were sewn shut. The sound came from the lungs, wet, bubbling, forced through ragged ribs. "You held the line, now you hold the memory." We opened fire. Las fire ripped across the platform. Dreb screamed as the flare pulsed in sync with each shot. But the dead didn't fall. They didn't even bleed. They moved like smoke caught in bone. Shots passed through them, tearing away coats, charring cloth, peeling skin. But beneath there was nothing, just echoes, just memory. 11:30, we ran, not upward. The scaffold was gone. The flare still hung above us, watching. The floor beneath us shifted, opened, revealing another passage, descending, always descending. And the sound of Halbrecht's voice followed us, not shouting, just speaking, calm, measured. "Obedience is eternal, identity is not. You are what remains. You are what obeys." We didn't know how long we ran. The corridor was narrow, pitched downward like a slide into fire. No steps, just a gradual slope that should have burned our legs but didn't, because pain had stopped meaning anything. And the walls, they were no longer walls. They were faces, thousands, mouths open, eyes shut. We passed Dreb's face first. He was still with us, running behind, but his face was already in the wall. 11:45. We reached the vault. At least that's what the writing on the gate called it. Archive Vault, 144th final record. A massive circular door, painted with names, our names. All of us, even the ones who had died in other campaigns, even the ones we never told anyone had died. Some scratched out, some freshly added. Varys stepped forward. His name was glowing. The door opened. No locks, no hissing servos, just a whisper. "Enter." We did. Inside was every mistake we'd made. The wrong coordinates, the late response, the wounded left behind, the silent refusal to obey impossible orders, each one rendered in glass and steel, voices played on loop. "Sir, we have no ammunition. We're not retreating. We're running. I don't want to die for dust." It was a cathedral of guilt, and Halbrecht waited at the altar. 11:55. He opened his arms. Behind him, the entire regiment, everyone we'd lost, standing, smiling, eyes empty, weapons raised in salute. And Halbrecht spoke. "There are no traitors here, only witnesses, only the faithful dead." Varys stepped forward, dropped his rifle, and said, "I remember now." Then he saluted and became still. 12 o'clock. The vault sealed. Our time was up, and above the mud, the flare finally landed. But we were already gone. There's no such thing as sleep on Lemuria. You close your eyes, but it doesn't take you. You lie down, but your limbs won't trust the ground. You count your breaths in the dark, trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. But sleep never comes, because somewhere deep down, even in the trenches, you know something is watching. 12:05. We don't remember sitting down, only that the vault became quiet. No more voices, no more lights, no more echoes. Just us in rows, shoulders slumped, backs bowed, like soldiers before a sermon. Varys stood at the front. His eyes were closed, not in prayer, not in peace, just shut, as if he had decided he no longer needed them. His mouth moved without sound. Dreb was gone. We didn't watch him vanish. We just looked around and saw less of us than before. And no one asked where he'd gone, because the ones who ask are the next to disappear. 12:10. Cale lit his last Alto stick. The tip glowed pale red, like a dying ember on a starless night. He passed it to me without speaking. We shared it like a ritual. The burn grounded us, something real in a place built from nothing. Rennick whispered, "Do you think this is what dying feels like?" Cale answered without looking at him, "Number, this is what being forgotten feels like." 12:15. The vault door still stood open, but what waited beyond it wasn't the same hallway. It was a trench, familiar, wrong. The mud still screamed, but now it whispered too. Every name we'd tried to forget, every face we'd buried, whispers slid under our boots like veins. Cale stared down into it. The muck shifted around his feet, and then he said something none of us could understand. "It's warm now." He stepped forward. His boots didn't sink. 12:20. The sky changed. We were no longer inside a vault or a bunker or a chasm of memory. We were standing on the battlefield again, back in the trench, back where it had all begun, except nothing moved. No shell fire, no distant artillery, no wind. Everything was still, perfect, preserved, like a photograph waiting to rot. We found our former post exactly as we'd left it. Bloodstains on the wall, graffiti scrawled in desperation. Last cells stacked neatly beside a half-dug firing pit. Our own helmets rested on the sandbags, but no one was inside them. Not yet. 12:25. I found my own handwriting scratched into the metal near the observation slit. It read, "Tell my brother I died screaming. I don't have a brother." 12:30. We sat down again. No one gave the order, no one protested. Our hands remembered the placement of rifles. Our eyes returned to the sightlines. Cale began muttering, the same 5 words, again and again. The flare never landed, the flare never landed. But we had seen it. We'd watched it rise, float, hang. We'd seen the memory it projected. So what was this? 12:40. Voices crackled over the vox. Faint, distant, not meant for us, not anymore. Command to 144th. Respond. 144th. Your orders are to hold obsidian. Confirm presence. Confirm presence. Dreb's voice replied, but Dreb was gone. Still holding. Still here. They sleep now. I keep watch. The vox cut off. Rennick stood. His rifle dropped to the ground. He turned to me and smiled, and I saw his eyes close while he stood. Not from sleep, from acceptance. 12:50. The trench darkened, not from nightfall, from something overhead. A shape, vast, silent, blotting out the pale daylight like a hand covering a dying candle. None of us looked up. We already knew what was there. United States, ourselves, above, watching, trapped in some mirrored orbit, dying, living, remembering, Cale finally said it out loud. We never left the bunker, Rennick agreed. We never left Trench 9. I added, we never left Lemuria, and Varys spoke the last truth. No one ever does. 12:55. The ground shifted. We were back in formation, standing, marching, each of us holding a flare, each one unlit, waiting, and from somewhere in the dark sky, a voice whispered, "No one sleeps on Lemuria." And we knew we weren't supposed to. The fire started before we struck the match. That's how we knew it wasn't mercy. It was ritual. 1300 hours. There were 7 of us left. We stood beside the half-dug fire pit behind the trench lip, the same place we'd stood the day Keller screamed, the same slope where the Medici tent used to be before it collapsed under shell fire and something else dragged the wounded away one by one, the same ground, but the wrong time. We didn't know when we were anymore, only that we had become part of the memory loop, not observers, not ghosts, inmates. Cale dropped the body onto the pyre. Rennick handed him the promethium flask. No one asked who it was. We'd stopped recognizing faces hours ago, even our own. The corpse didn't look dead, still warm, eyes open, lips moving. "Help," it whispered. But Cale struck the match, and the flames obeyed. 13:10. I watched the fire crawl up the legs first, blackened cloth shriveling into ash, skin turning glassy and dark. No blood, no screaming, but the mouth kept moving. "I served," it said. "I obeyed. I held the line." Cale didn't blink, just stepped back. "I know," he whispered, and that was the last mercy he had to give. 13:15. Varys said the same thing he always said before the burning. It's what they would have wanted, but we all knew that was a lie. They never asked for this. We didn't burn them because they were dying. We burned them because we couldn't let them speak, because some of them started whispering before they died, and what they whispered should never be heard twice. 13:20. The next wounded man had no legs, but he smiled when he saw us. "Back already?" he asked. We hadn't seen him before. Not in this trench, not in any campaign. His tags were blank. His uniform bore no name, but he wore our unit's colors, our standard, as if he'd been waiting. Rennick knelt beside him. "You know what comes next." The wounded man nodded, still smiling. "You'll burn me, yes? That's the right. That's how you keep the memory from spreading." I didn't want to ask, but the words left my mouth on their own. "What memory?" He looked me in the eyes. His eyes were hollow, glass orbs filled with ash. That we died before the order was given, that Lemuria never needed us, that we were already fuel for the fire. Then he opened his mouth wider, too wide, and a second voice crawled out. "We are the smoke you breathe." We burned him, fast, and this time the fire was blue. 13:30. We built the next pyre without speaking. The mud was whispering again, not screams now, just names, all the names we'd ever written in the casualty logs. Names we erased when command said unrecoverable. They spoke with quiet voices, not angry, not vengeful, just tired. "Still here," they said, "still waiting." We pulled another stretcher from the shadows, but this time there was no one on it, just the shape of a man, indented in the cloth, still bleeding. Cale dropped the torch. The shape burst into flame. The air screamed. 13:40. Varys finally broke, dropped to his knees, hands shaking, face twisted in something between laughter and horror. He looked at us, each of us. "Why do we keep doing it? They're already dead. They've been dead. We've been dead." No one answered, because that was the rule. The moment you question the fire, it remembers your name. 13:45. I saw Keller again, the one who'd vanished beneath the mud. He crawled out near the latrine trench, legs dragging, uniform in tatters, no skin on his arms, eyes burned white, but he smiled. "Was it enough?" he asked. I didn't know what to say, so he answered for me. "Number but burn me anyway, just in case." We did. 13:50. Only 4 of us remained. We burned 12 that hour, some with bodies, some without. Some spoke in our voices, some spoke in voices we remembered from other planets. One whispered the litany of obedience backward. One simply screamed until his teeth cracked. 13:55. Cale tried to sleep. He dug a pit beside the trench wall, curled into it, and closed his eyes. We let him, because no one could stay awake forever. But 5 minutes later, he started to whisper, not his voice, a woman's, soft where gentle. He held the line. He died with hope. He remembered the scream, but not the name. We buried him. Then we burned the dirt. 1,400 hours. The fire never stopped. Even when we ran out of bodies, it kept burning, and the smoke rose high over Lemuria's broken sky, a beacon for the forgotten, a signal to no one. But in the curling heat, we saw the truth. We weren't burning the wounded. We were burning the past over and over again to keep from remembering who we really were. We thought nothing could surprise us anymore. Not after the screams in the mud. Not after burning the wounded who whispered our own names. Not after watching the commissar talk to corpses. But then the sky changed, and we realized we'd only been looking down. 1,400 hours. The trench had grown quiet again. We stood in ash. Cale was buried. Rennick stood facing the wall. And Varys just stared upward, his neck stiff, his mouth half open, not breathing, not blinking. That was when we saw it. The sky had split, not a storm, not warp fallout. It was a wound, a vertical rupture stretching from horizon to horizon, glowing with soft red light, like the inside of a cauterized vein, bleeding into the atmosphere in slow motion. No thunder, no fire, just bleeding light. 1405. It wasn't sunrise, not on Lemuria. The sun here is a dull flicker behind poisoned clouds, sickly and weak. But this light was different, stronger, intentional, and it began to drip. At first we thought it was rain, then we realized it wasn't falling down, it was rising. Droplets of red light lifted from the surface, slow, steady, dancing in spirals, and vanished into the wound in the sky. Like the planet itself was being bled dry. 1410, Rennick spoke, first time in half an hour. They're taking us back. Who? I asked. He didn't answer, just pointed, and I saw what he meant. High above, within the bleeding tear, something moved, shapes, black and gliding, not ships, not birds, more like eyes, watching, tracking. Each eye was ringed in fire, each blink came with a wave of nausea, and every time they blinked, we remembered something we shouldn't have. 1415. I remembered the screams at Hive Caltron, not the ones from the enemy, not even our own. The ones from the survivors, the ones we buried alive because we ran out of morphine. They begged, we obeyed, and I remembered. I smiled when I pulled the trigger. Rennick remembered the child, a stowaway on the troop transport, caught, interrogated, labeled psycho risk, and thrown into the recycler. And when she screamed his name. He said it wasn't his fault, but now he heard it every time the sky blinked. 1420. Varys whispered, "This is the reward. This is what loyalty earns." He raised his laser gun, not at the sky, at himself. We grabbed it before he could pull the trigger, but I think we were wrong to stop him, because a minute later, his skin began to glow, faint veins of red light pulsing just beneath the surface, same color as the sky. He didn't notice, but we did. 1430. The light intensified. It wasn't illumination. It was exposure. Everything we'd buried came crawling back out of the trenches of memory. The names, the screams, the lies we wrote in after-action reports. Enemy fire, collateral damage, shell shock. But the sky knew the truth, and now it bled it into the world. Rennick vomited. Not food, not bile. Ash, thick, black, warm. I saw something moving in it, small and white. Teeth. He wiped his mouth and said nothing. 1435. The trench began to vibrate, not from bombardment, from sound. A low, constant hum, building, resonating with the bones in our teeth. The same pitch we'd heard in the bunker, the same one Law had hummed before he disappeared. Now it came from the sky. Each note struck a chord in our memories, and each memory became real. We saw Grinnell again, still screaming beneath the mud. We saw Dreb, kneeling in front of a non-existent Vox, bleeding from the eyes, mumbling coded prayers to no one. We saw ourselves, standing, sitting, marching, burning. The sky bled light, and the light told the truth. 1440. Varys collapsed. His skin was hot to the touch, pulsing now with lines of molten red, like veins made of fire. He looked up at us, grinning like a man who'd been waiting for this his entire life. "I see it," he said. "What do you see?" I asked. "The end." He didn't mean death. He meant the last page of everything. He meant a place where no more orders would ever come, where the Emperor would forget our names. He wanted that. 1445. I looked up again. One of the bleeding eyes blinked for the last time, and it closed, not in sleep, in relief, as if it had finally seen enough, and the tear in the sky began to heal, slowly, painfully, and with every stitch of bleeding light that closed, something left us. A name, a memory, a face. Rennick forgot his mother's name. I forgot what regiment we were. Varys forgot how many of us there had ever been. We were being erased. 1450. A final drop of light landed on my shoulder. I touched it. It sank into my skin like ink, and I heard a voice, not outside me, but within. "You have been witnessed. You are now memory. Sleep is denied." And then the sky turned dark again. 1455. We stood in silence. The wound above was gone. The light had bled dry, and whatever watched us was done. Varys was still glowing faintly, but the heat was gone. He looked at us and said, "There's nothing left to hold." And we nodded, because there was no war anymore, just the echo of soldiers who never stopped obeying. 1500 hours. We returned to our positions in the trench, without speaking, without orders. We raised our rifles and waited, not for the enemy, not for relief, but for the next flare that would never land. Time doesn't run forward on Lemuria. It folds, it bleeds, it remembers, even when we try to forget. And sometimes, when the blood on your boots dries too fast, when the screams you buried stop echoing, you wake up hours before your death, and the only thing waiting for you is silence. 4 a.m. We opened our eyes inside the command post. That's not where we fell asleep. That's not where we burned the wounded. That's not where we watched the sky bleed. But it's where we were now. Same walls, same ash-stained banners, same long dead picked feeds flickering behind frost-coated armor glass. But no personnel, no vox clicks, no cogitator hum, just silence. Varys stood first. His skin no longer glowed, but his eyes were bloodshot, threaded with hairline fractures of red that pulsed every few seconds. He didn't speak, just looked at us like he was waiting to see if we'd remember something. Rennick muttered, "This is before." I checked the chronometer on the data slab. It read 4 a.m. date corrupted log cycle error, but the last recorded message was still blinking. I tapped the screen. The transmission played once. "This is Command Bastion Echo 7A, requesting confirmation of field presence. Lemurian 144th, please advise. Are you still receiving? We are experiencing silence across all channels. Confirm your last position. Confirm your last living officer. Confirm any remaining will to obey." Then it looped and looped until the screen cracked and bled black. 4:05. We began to explore. The Bastion had been abandoned for weeks. We'd seen it destroyed, atomized during orbital bombardment on day 3. But now it stood whole, fresh, walls intact, defenses powered, no bodies, no signs of retreat, only the eerie sense that someone had walked out mid-task. Half-written orders lay open on the Auspex tables. A ration tin still steamed near a forgotten laspistol. One of the cogitators had a half-sent message on screen. "They've stopped answering. I think they're still moving, but I don't know if it's them anymore." The timestamp, 4 hours in the future. 040513, signed Commissar Halbrecht. 4:10. We reached the Vox room. Every unit was dead, screens blank, channels silent, except one, Unit 144-Delta. The receiver was still warm, and the light was blinking, not green, red, not transmitting, not receiving, recording. We didn't touch it, but it played anyway. Our own voices, from earlier, from later, from places we hadn't reached yet. He died before the flare landed. No one sleeps on Lemuria. We burned the wounded. This is the reward. Each line matched perfectly. We looked at each other, eyes hollow. The command post wasn't a shelter. It was a mirror, showing us everything we had already become. 4:15. We opened the armory. Nothing was missing. Racks lined with unused hell guns, frag packs, fusion cells, except one locker, empty, its tag, Varus LT. He stared into it for a long time. Inside, on the shelf, was a flare, unlit, but the moment he touched it, it activated. Soft red light, no heat, just that familiar flickering pulse, and the voice of General Traven, dead 2 weeks now, flooded the room. All units prepare for final defense. Hold your trench. Reinforcements will not come. The enemy is not to be engaged. Repeat, do not engage. Observe, endure, record, then static, then silence. 4:20. Varys sat down, flare still in hand. He looked at us like a man who had already died and been told to die again, properly this time. Rennick asked him what we were supposed to do. Varys shook his head. I think we already did it. I think we're just here now, stuck between memory and consequence. I sat beside him because the walls had started pulsing again, not with light, with breath. 4:25. We checked the officers' quarters. The beds were made, everything in perfect order, except for one thing. Each pillow was marked with a burn. A flare had landed there, melted clean through the cloth, but no ash, no scorch, just a red sigil beneath the fabric. Sleep is denied. Rennick found a mirror. He stared into it for minutes, then laughed. Software hopeless. We asked what he saw. Not me, he said. Never was. He walked back into the corridor and was gone by the time we followed. 4:30. We climbed to the upper command platform. The sky above Lemuria was red again, bleeding again, but slower this time, exhausted. It felt quieter now, not safer, just more honest, like the planet was tired of pretending there had ever been a war, and so were we. 4:40. Varys lit the flare. It didn't rise. It burned where it stood, base of the platform, flickering in rhythm with the pulsing floor. And as it burned, something emerged from the shadows of the bastion. Us, a second version, marching, uniforms clean, faces calm. They didn't look at us. They stood beside us and raised their rifles, waiting for the final order. 4:50. A voice spoke through the vox one last time. All units of the 144th. Final order received. Command is now silence. No further transmissions will be issued. You are the command now. You are the line. You are the silence. 4:59. The bastion began to dim, light fading, steel rusting, memory collapsing. We stood shoulder to shoulder with ourselves, our echoes, our replacements. And as the chrono ticked toward the final hour, we didn't pray, we didn't scream, we just stood, because that's what the forgotten do. We met him long after we stopped believing there were other survivors. He was sitting on a collapsed barricade of shattered hab walls, playing with the teeth of a corpse, not eating them, not counting them, just gently turning them between his fingers, humming some tune that didn't belong in a place like Lemuria. Something soft, something that might have once been sung to children before the nightmares began. We didn't know his name. He never gave it. We called him what everyone else on the front used to whisper, the guardsman who laughs. The first thing he said to us wasn't a greeting. He didn't ask for food, water, rank, or confirmation of reality. He just looked at us and asked, "Did they finally let you out of the loop?" None of us answered, not right away, because we didn't know what loop he meant. But the way the ground pulsed beneath our boots told us the question had already answered itself. We had wandered for hours since the bastion faded, or had it been days? Time meant nothing now. The flare had landed, the trenches had burned, our memories folded in on themselves until we couldn't tell if we were walking forward or simply walking through a memory that refused to end. And then we found him, sitting where the map said nothing existed, where no patrol had ever returned from, where even the screaming mud had gone quiet. He looked at us like we were guests arriving late to a performance that had started decades ago. "Come," he said, patting a slab of rubble. "Sit down, no rush. The war doesn't start for another hour." Kale, now reduced to trembling silence, sat first. I followed. Rennick stood staring at the horizon, refusing to turn his back on the fog. Varys remained still, fingers clenched around the flare that refused to go out. "Why are you laughing?" I asked. The man tilted his head. His face was pale, eyes sunken like the rest of us, but his mouth never stopped smiling. He chuckled, a hollow, dry sound like a shell casing rattling inside a coffin. Because I know the joke, and you don't. Not yet. We asked where his unit was. He laughed again. Same place yours is, somewhere between orders and aftermath. Somewhere in the gap the Emperor doesn't look. Cale finally spoke, voice low. Are you alive? The man shrugged. Does it matter? 1430, or so the chrono claimed. The air above us began to fracture, not explode. Fracture. Thin hairline cracks in the sky. Like the dome of reality itself was giving in to pressure it no longer understood. Through those cracks, we saw other skies, orange, violet, black as sin, stars where none should exist, a frozen sun spinning sideways, a planet screaming without sound. Ah, the guardsman said, not looking up. Time's breaking again, happens when too many souls die at once in the same place. Is that what happened here? I asked. Lemuria, obsidian sector, the trenches that never ended. Here, he asked, now threading the teeth into a necklace. Number, this place is still dying. That's worse. He stood up, bones cracking like dry sticks. He walked over to Varys and took the flare from his hand, held it to his ear like a conch shell, listened, nodded, then tossed it over his shoulder. It didn't land, it didn't fall, it simply vanished, mid-air, like it had never existed. See? He said, that's the punchline. You didn't light it, it lit you. Rennick raised his rifle then, he didn't point it. He just held it like a question. If this is all a joke, he said, voice shaking, then who's laughing? The guardsman smiled wide. His teeth were all the same size, all the same shade. Not natural, not human. I don't laugh for them, he said. I laugh for you, for all of us. He turned and gestured behind him. We hadn't noticed before, but there was a line of helmets embedded in the mud. Dozens, hundreds, all facing the same direction, all half buried, each one with a single word scratched into the brow plate. Not names, just numbers, dates, some in the past, some still yet to happen. The last helmet read, today, 1445. The ground behind us buckled, not from bombardment, from return. The trench we had fled, the bastion we had abandoned, the bunker we had died inside, all of it was back. Every echo, every body, staring at us from the past we could not unlive. The guardsman turned to look. It's resetting, he said. Loop starting again. No, I said, we're done with that. But he shook his head. Doesn't matter what you believe. What matters is what the trench believes. And it believes in sacrifice. We tried to run, but the sky fractured again, and through the cracks came light, not warm, not illuminating, accusatory. It highlighted every failed order, every ignored distress call, every silent consent to atrocity. Cale dropped to his knees. Rennick turned his rifle on the sky and fired. The bullets turned to ash. Varys whispered, "No one leaves." The guardsman who laughs sat back down, watched the trench remake itself. The fire pits reformed. The dead crawled back into position. The orders rewrote themselves on parchment. The Vox units reassembled. "Would you like to know the secret?" he asked. We didn't speak, but he told us anyway. The war's over, has been for years, but the trench doesn't know how to stop fighting. And you're part of it now. You're not soldiers anymore, you're scenery. He laughed again, and behind us, we saw ourselves returning, marching in formation, blank-eyed, blood-slicked, carrying the same flare that refused to die. 1455. We reached for our weapons. We raised them, not at the enemy, at ourselves. But nothing fired. The triggers were gone, just smooth, seamless metal where a mechanism should be. Because in this place, there are no choices, only replays. And the guardsman who laughs leaned close to me, whispering, "When the flare lands this time, try not to scream. It won't change anything, but it's funny." And I saw, in his eyes, my own reflection, smiling. We thought it was just shelling, the way the ground churned, heaved, how the sky flickered with that pale, burnt orange smear of dust and static. You get used to strange sounds in the trenches. It's the things that don't sound strange that you should fear, because at 1302, Rennick pulled something out of the mud. Not a mine, not a corpse, just a jaw. Perfect, whole, human maybe. But the thing was, it was only teeth. No flesh, no gum line, no skull. Just a jawbone packed entirely with tightly gritted, clenched human teeth. 3 rows, each one different. Varys leaned in. Maybe it's from the Medicaid pile, he muttered. But even he didn't believe it. We'd seen what came from the Medicaid pile. This wasn't torn. This was made. Carefully, lovingly, deliberate. 1308. We dug another meter forward in silence. The mud moaned under the entrenching tools. Not from shifting pressure, not from vented gases, from throats. Somewhere beneath the trench wall, voices were trying to breathe, and they weren't buried. They were grown. Cale hit something solid. He knelt, brushed mud aside with trembling fingers. A helmet, regulation, Lemurian pattern, just like ours. But its shape was off, too long near the front. Visor split open like a mouth, like it had chewed its wearer to death. Inside it were more teeth, not in a jaw, just floating, loose. Dozens of them, like the helmet had been fed. 1312. The ground gave out, no warning. Cale vanished with a yelp, swallowed by the trench floor like a man being taken by the warp itself. We called for him, no answer. Then we heard it, crunching, wet, slow, deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch, like something was chewing something tough. We lowered a rope. Cale came up slowly, shaking, eyes wide, arms trembling. He didn't say anything, just held out a piece of cloth, standard issue flat coat, stained with blood and soil, but it wasn't Cale's. The name tag read Cale S. 1315. We were still trying to process it when Rennick started retching, bent over, dry heaving. Then something came out of his throat. At first we thought it was just vomit, until we saw the shape. He'd spit up a molar, then another and another, each one perfect, whole, none of them his. His own teeth were still in his mouth. 1320. We found more of them. Teeth in rations, teeth in our canteens, teeth sewn into the seams of our trench coats. And no matter how many we threw away, they came back. They rattled in our pockets. They filled the cracks in the trench walls. We tried to bury them, but the mud just spat them back up. Varys whispered, "They're markers. They're tags. Each one's a record." Rennick asked, "Of what?" Varys didn't answer, but we all understood. Each one was a tally of death, of feeding, of what the mud had become. 1330. We found the others, the previous squad, or what was left of them. The trench wall just gave way, and there they were. 8 guardsmen, perfectly preserved, sitting side by side, backs against the dirt, helmets on, eyes open, each one grinning, because each one had nothing but teeth. Their skin was pale, stretching too thin across their skulls. No lips, just gaping mouths filled with rows upon rows of mismatched human teeth, some still chewing. No lungs, no stomach, just teeth. Cale fell to his knees, started laughing, or maybe crying, hard to tell. He pointed at one of them. The patch on its shoulder matched his, exactly, the same burn mark, same tear at the seam, the name tag, Cale S. Same as the jacket, same as him. He looked up at us, face pale. I think I was already here. I think I never left. 1335. The trench began to breathe, not figuratively, not the way soldiers say it, like a sigh through the mud. Actually breathe. Walls pulsed, the floor convulsed. Mud lifted in shallow waves. From somewhere deep below, a groaning exhalation rose up. The scent of copper, the warmth of rot, the heat of digestion. Varys dropped his rifle, began reciting the litany of survival, over and over. But each time he reached the final verse, the words changed. They became a chant we didn't recognize, or rather, one we tried not to remember. Something old, something hungry. 1340. We tried to run, but every path curved back. Turn left, back to the tooth-lined helmet. Turn right, back to the 8-seated guardsman. Up the trench steps, back into the same trench. The lines no longer matched the map. They'd become a moor. The trench wasn't a trench anymore. It was a throat. 1345. Something tried to speak through Cale. He staggered, clutched his stomach, mouth opened, and we heard a voice that didn't belong to any of us. "You fed me war. You fed me death. Now I chew memory. I gnaw the name from your bones." Varys screamed, fired into the mud, but the mud bled and laughed and spat teeth back at us. 1350. Rennick ran, or tried to. He made it 15 paces before the trench swallowed his legs. Not the ground. The trench. It wrapped around his knees like muscle, tightened like tendons, snapped bones like twigs. He went down screaming, then stopped. His head fell backward, mouth wide, and from that mouth more teeth spilled out. Not his, never his. 13:55. We huddled by the comms unit, trying to call out, to reach anyone, but the static was teeth. Every sound bite a scrape, every signal a bite. The machine spoke back in chewing noises, and then a whisper. You are already inside me. 1400 hours. The flare went up. Someone, somewhere had launched it. It burned red, then white, then something outside the visible spectrum. A scream without sound. We looked up, and every flake of falling light, teeth, raining down like ash. By 1400 hours the world had already cracked, but it didn't shatter all at once. It peeled, layer by layer, like skin sloughing off in the heat, and beneath it, something familiar. That made it worse. We were reduced to 5 now. Me, Cale, Varys, Thorn, and Sergeant Keller, except we'd buried Keller at 9:45. We remembered it. We'd stacked the rocks, said the rites. I'd held his tags. So when we found him again at 14:03, standing perfectly upright, just 10 meters down the trench, we froze. His armor was clean, boots polished, laurel intact on the shoulder plate. No blood, no damage, no memory of death. Why are you staring? He asked, voice crisp. None of us answered. He tilted his head. Report. Varys stepped forward. Sergeant Keller, is this a test? The man's eyes twitched. Just once, like glass cracking. You are out of formation. Reclaim your section or face disciplinary lashing. We all looked at each other, because at 14:05 our Vox link lit up, and from it came another voice. This is Sergeant Keller. I'm trapped. My legs are gone. Coordinates, echo low, Mark 32. Don't trust what you see. We turned back. The first Keller was gone. Only his boots remained, polished, still upright, as if they'd never held a body, as if they'd walked themselves there and waited to be seen. 14:07. We pushed toward the source of the second Keller's Vox call. It shouldn't have been far, and yet it took us 16 minutes to reach it. Trenches folding in on themselves, turning like intestines, walls slick and breathing. Thorn whispered, this isn't a battlefield, it's digestion. 14:23. We found Keller, the second one, the one we'd buried, only now he was crawling. No legs, just the stump of a flat coat from the waist down, dragging himself through the mud. But his face, it was normal, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. Don't shoot, he whispered. It wears us. It wears uniforms now. That was my body, earlier. I think it remembered how to stand. Cale fell to his knees. This can't be real. I watched you die. Keller didn't argue. He just nodded. You did. Then it stitched me back. Wrong, but it couldn't fake what you felt. 14:30. We tried to move him, tried to lift him out, but his back was rooted, not attached, rooted. Pale tendrils ran from his spine into the trench wall, like veins or nerves. I'm part of it now, he said, but I'm still me, for now. His hand trembled. He handed me something, his tags, again. I looked down. I already had a set. Cale, too. Thorn checked his coat, another set, each one genuine, identical. Every Keller's death marked with real metal. 14:38. Keller started to change, mid-sentence. The left side of his face folded, didn't melt, folded, like skin becoming origami, inside. Not muscle, not skull, just folds upon folds of faces. Other faces, some looked like mine, others like no one I'd ever seen, and each one mouthed the same phrase silently. I was him too. Varys snapped, pulled his laser gun. Keller raised a hand. Don't. That's what it wants. Violence gives it pattern. Pattern gives it form. But Varys fired anyway. A single bolt. Right into Keller's chest. No scream. No recoil. Only blooming. His body didn't fall. It unfolded, panel by panel, like opening a box within a box, and each layer, a different version of him. One Keller praying, one laughing, one with no eyes, one made entirely of teeth. The last layer was me, staring back, wearing my face, my armor, smiling, mouth full of Sergeant Keller's tags. 14:45. The wind returned, no scent, no warmth, just the low-pressure hiss of static air, like before a thunderstrike. And then, the trench tilted, not caved, tilted, upward. Gravity bent, or lied. We stumbled to keep balance. Water ran sideways. Cale was on the ground, gasping. His stomach was swelling, like he'd been drinking mud. Thorn bent down. Too late. Cale vomited dog tags, hundreds, all of them stamped Keller T, his own name, overwritten. I looked back. The trench wall was now a mirror, not glass, mud, but perfectly reflective, and from it I saw us, all 5, then 6, then 7, each reflection, a different emotion, one smiling, one crying, one cutting its wrists with a bayonet, none of them moving as we did. They stared back with awareness. 14:55. We reached the fallback point, or thought we had. There was a body slumped at the barricade, armor crushed, head cracked open like a dropped helmet. It was Keller again, the first one, polished boots, clean armor, dead. In his hand, a picture, cracked, stained, but clear enough. It showed our squad, all of us, standing in formation, but the background was wrong. A trench that didn't exist, a sky that was teeth, and 2 of me. The caption read, 1400 hours, hour 4 of repetition. Thorn backed away. He looked at me. We're being replayed, over and over. This isn't a battle, it's a recording. I checked my pocket. There were 6 sets of tags now, all mine, each stamped with a different time, 14:59. We saw the flare again, burning backward this time, white to red, then dark, and from the sky the ash didn't fall. It rose, from the mud, from our eyes, from the hole Keller left behind. We dragged him through the trench by the shoulders. The blood left a trail behind us, dark and steaming in the cold morning air. It wasn't his blood, it wasn't ours either. Not anymore. Corporal Fenn kept mumbling prayers under his breath, like a broken Vox hymn on loop. I think it was the litany of healing, but jumbled. The words came out in the wrong order, like he was choking on each one. The medici tent should have been just ahead, just behind the crumbled habrek we'd turned into a triage station. Only it wasn't. It was there, yes, but the canvas flap was gone, hanging in threads. No lights, no groans, no antiseptic sting in the air. Just a quiet, too thick to breathe in. I knew something was wrong the moment we crossed the threshold. The smell hit first. Not rot, not decay, worse, nothing, no blood, no chem cleanser, no stink of burnt flesh or infection, just absence, as if the air had been scraped clean. Fenn dropped the wounded trooper we were carrying, didn't even notice. He stared forward. I turned, and that's when I saw it. Medici Darvas was standing at the far end of the tent. His white coat was soaked black with something that shimmered under the flickering ceiling light. He didn't move when we called his name. He just stood there, scalpel in one hand. The other was resting on the head of a guardsman on the table. A young one, couldn't have been more than 17. His chest was open, ribs cracked wide, heart missing. And Darvas, he didn't have a face. It wasn't that it had been burned or mutilated. It was smooth, flat. The skin was sealed over where the eyes, nose and mouth should be, almost surgical. No blood, no sign of trauma, just skin, as if the Emperor had forgotten to finish sculpting him. Fenn backed away, tripped over the dropped trooper, and landed hard. I didn't move. Darvas, or what wore his uniform, tilted its head slightly like it was listening. Then, impossibly, it began to speak. Not from the sealed mouth. There wasn't one. The words came from the chest of the boy on the table. His open cavity pulsed like a throat, and the sound that came out wasn't human. There is no healing, only reshaping, only return to source. The sound scraped my mind. I felt something twitch in the back of my skull. Fenn screamed and started reciting the full litany of protection over and over, voice climbing to a shriek. I raised my laser gun, fired once. The shot hit Darvas square in the chest. He staggered, but didn't bleed. The shimmer on his coat darkened, as if absorbing the energy. Then, faster than I could react, he turned and drove the scalpel into the neck of the boy on the table. Deep, deliberate, ritualistic. Blood sprayed, but instead of hitting the ground, it rose. Suspended mid-air in droplets, spinning around the tent like orbiting stars. I fired again, and again. By the fourth shot, Davos collapsed backward onto the floor. The scalpel clattered next to him. The boy's body slumped, silent. The hovering blood drops hung in the air for a moment longer, then all dropped at once with a sickening splat. We didn't approach the body. We didn't speak. We ran. Outside, the light had changed. The sky had gone from grey to a deep, unnatural red, like there was a filter between us and real daylight. The trench ahead shimmered slightly, as if seen through heat haze. Fen was muttering again. I saw him yesterday, the medici. He checked my arm, said it was just sprained. He joked about it. He smiled. His voice broke. Who stitched him shut? No one answered. By the time we reached Fireteam Talis, they were already gone. Not dead. Gone. Their trench was intact. Rations still steaming on the makeshift cooker. Last packs half loaded. Helmets on the crates, but no people. 6 guardsmen gone without trace. No blood, no bodies, just the strong, pungent reek of antiseptic and something burnt, like flesh, burnt from the inside. One helmet sat perfectly placed on the sandbag ledge. It had a message scratched into it. Medicae came to help. Fen threw up. I checked the chrono on my wrist. 3:13, 3 hours left. We backtracked toward our own lines. Only there were no lines anymore, just scattered squads, half mad, bleeding, chanting things that didn't sound like the creed anymore. One group of engineers had nailed shut a tunnel mouth and were praying to it. They said they'd heard heartbeat echoes in the darkness. Another squad had lit flares in a ring and stood in the center, blindfolded. They said the Emperor would guide their aim if they couldn't see the false shapes anymore. And us? We followed the path of the wounded. Those who had limped out of the fight, those who were supposed to make it back. We found their trail near Outpost 17. The bloodstains were steady, rhythmic, left, right, then they stopped, abruptly, and in the dirt, boot prints, a dozen of them, all facing the same direction, back toward the front. Back toward the front, that's where we found the second medici tent, identical to the first, down to the patch on the left canvas flap. Only this one hadn't been deployed, it was grown. The canvas was skin, stretched, pale, and stitched with black surgical thread. The poles were bones, long, human, polished. The entrance flap was open, hanging like a yawning mouth. Inside, something moved. We didn't go in, we couldn't, not even Fen. We watched from the ridge above, just enough to see the shadow inside. A silhouette bent over a table. Something squirmed on the slab, and then it turned to face us. It didn't run. It didn't speak. It just tilted its head again, listening. Then it pointed toward the horizon, back toward the trench, and smiled. It didn't have a mouth, but it smiled. We didn't run. We couldn't. Our legs weren't ours anymore. We stood there for 5 minutes, maybe longer, breathing shallow, hearing things in the air, soft wet noises like stitching, like sewing. When we finally got back to HQ, Lieutenant Karsh was dead, gun in his mouth, trigger pulled. He'd left one message, burned into his desk with a lascutter. The medicae cannot be killed. He fixes us wrong. He keeps trying. There was blood on the ceiling, and the smell of antiseptic. Again, we sealed the bunker door behind us. We didn't speak. Not about the missing face. Not about the boy on the table. Not about the second medici tent. Fen broke first. He pulled his shirt open and started clawing at his chest. It's under the skin. I can feel the stitches. He's in me. I hit him. I'm not proud, but I had to. He passed out. I stood alone, laser gun in hand, facing the hallway. The lights flickered, and in the last working reflective panel, scratched metal, dulled with grime, I saw my own face. No eyes, no mouth, only smooth skin. And behind me, a scalpel, raised. Hour 3 begins, and with it, the realization that the guns are no longer ours. We didn't notice it at first. The silence had become normal. The last time our artillery thundered was over a day ago, and even then it had been sluggish, like the guns were hesitant, like they feared what they might awaken if they fired too deep. But at exactly 3 a.m., the ground shook, a full battery, 10 guns minimum, only it wasn't us. We scrambled up from our sleep-deprived trances and pressed against the bunker walls. The tremors rattled the teeth in our heads. Every man and woman stared at the ceiling like it might cave in. "Where the feth is that coming from?" someone asked. No one answered. The Vox was still silent. The sky stayed pitch black. There were no flares, no forward movement, no command, just shell after shell, thundering in from coordinates we didn't recognize. It wasn't our pattern. Every regiment knows their own artillery by rhythm. It's like a heartbeat, a specific cadence, a signature. You know the distance, the size, the delay between volleys. You learn to trust it. But this wasn't us. This fire had no rhythm, no targeting, just noise, chaos, roars in strange sequences, like someone, something, was punching coordinates into the system that didn't exist, bombarding places that weren't marked on any map. Sergeant Hark called a perimeter check. A dozen of us moved to the forward lines. The fog was thinner here, and we could see the craters forming beyond the wire. Only, there was nothing in them. No earth, no shrapnel, just holes, perfect round holes, burned into the soil. No soot, no smoke, just scorched dirt and something else. I knelt by one. The smell hit first, sweet, too sweet, like rotting sugar fruit left in the sun. Then the noise, low, wet, a dripping sound, and that's when I saw it. The hole wasn't just burned, it was melting. Private Tellian bent over to touch the soil. It hissed. His hand turned black in seconds, boiled from the inside out. He didn't scream. He couldn't. His tongue had fused to his teeth. We dragged him back under the tarp, wrapped the stump in flamer cloth, and left him muttering prayers into a dirty bandage. Hark called it in, but the Vox buzzed back nonsense. Nothing coherent, just static and whispering. One voice kept repeating a phrase in binaric. Artillery pattern not recognized. Repeat, pattern not recognized. The tech priest, Vox adept Imhal, went pale. He unplugged his own neural port and stepped away from the console. "I've heard that pattern before," he said, "during the drills." "What drills?" I asked. Imhal didn't answer, just whispered, "We weren't supposed to survive them." The next barrage came closer. No scream of incoming shells, just the sudden impact, as if the sky had skipped a step. The ground erupted 50 meters from our trench. The crater it left was deeper than a chimera is tall, and in the middle was something shining. We thought it was shell casing at first, but it pulsed, red, then white, then red again, like a heartbeat. We were told never to approach unspent munitions, so naturally, Corporal Rin did exactly that. He climbed out of the trench before anyone could stop him, laughing. "Maybe it's one of ours. Maybe the Cog boys dropped a gift from orbit." He reached it. Then he stopped. Not paused. Stopped. Like a hololith freezing. He tilted his head, touched the object, and vanished. No sound, no flash, just gone. His helmet rolled down into the trench a second later, cracked open, empty. We sealed the front line that night. Sandbags, flame mesh, prayer seals, anything we could stack between us and the surface. Hark ordered the second line reinforced and had the flame teams re-bless their canisters. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. We obeyed because we were too afraid not to. But when I looked at his hands, they were trembling. And when he thought no one was looking, he carved a small aquila into his own palm with a broken shard of bayonet. He kept whispering, "Our three, our three." It gets worse. The next round hit trench sector Epsilon. That's where the Medicaid tent used to be. When we checked the perimeter feed, the auto-picked recorders showed nothing but static, except one frame, one single captured moment before it all went dark. Roran was standing, in the middle of the crater, no face, just flesh where a face should be. He was holding a scalpel. The commissar saw it. He didn't say a word, just walked into his command shelter, locked the door, and hasn't come out since. There's something wrong with the artillery. Something deeper than malfunction or enemy sabotage. Something forgotten. Imhal came back this evening. His augmetics are twitching. He says he saw a pattern in the shelling. He says it matches an old code. A forgotten targeting sequence from before the sector was settled. Shelling coordinates that no longer exist, he told us. Coordinates from a war we never fought, against enemies we've never met. He showed us the map. It had names on it, names we didn't recognize. One of them was ours. At 4 a.m. the guns stopped, not with a taper, not like they were winding down. They just stopped, mid-volley, and the sky went quiet, too quiet. Even the wind held its breath, and that's when we heard it. Something moving under the ground. Not rats, not enemy sappers, something huge. Private Ori started screaming, said the shelling wasn't bombardment, said it was drilling. The fog outside isn't natural anymore, it's humming. Somewhere beneath us, the earth breathes, and every minute I feel like we're not counting down to relief. We're counting down to release. The fog never cleared, not even a little. We woke to a world painted in grey, soundless except for breath and distant groans, sounds that never seemed to come from any one direction. We were already starving, but by hour 250, the hunger began to ache, not just in our stomachs, but in our heads, like something was chewing through memory. Sergeant Hark had a simple order, ration issue. It should have been straightforward, but nothing is simple anymore. The supply crates had come 3 days ago, dropped from an overflight during a lull in bombardment, most of them shattered on impact. Some turned up cracked open, others crushed by their own weight. What survived had been moved to a central storage bunker behind the second trench line, marked in off-white stencil across every metal box. Human, use only, stamped in bold red ink. A warning, not a reassurance. We joked about it, back when jokes still lived. Emperor, save us from getting the wrong kind of rations. Wouldn't want to eat Ogrin feed again. But now, staring at those stamped words on cold grey steel, I couldn't stop wondering, why the emphasis? Who else, what else, might be issued these? Private Gall cracked open the first crate with a rusted pry bar. The seals hissed like a breathing wound. Inside, dull brown packs, no labels, no nutrient tables, no regimental markings, no expiry, just vacuum-sealed slabs. The Medici, Voss, squinted at one. "This isn't Grok's meat," he said. No one responded. Gall took a bite anyway. He chewed once, grimaced, then gagged, spat black sludge onto the dirt. "Feth, tastes like rust and ash." But half an hour later, Gall was the only one moving easily, alert, energetic. He paced the trench with a strange smile and tapped his fingers constantly, like he was counting something that didn't exist. We all gave in eventually. The hunger was stronger than doubt. Some didn't even heat it, just tore open the pouches with their teeth like animals. No one spoke while eating. There was only the wet, sloppy sound of chewing and the occasional cough. Corporal Juna sat beside me and whispered something I haven't been able to forget. It tastes like remembering something I never knew. That night people began hearing things, not out in the fog, inside the trench walls, scratching, thumping, soft, wet slithering. Private Wex kept shining his Auspex into the support beams, said he saw movement behind the sandbags. Nothing showed up on his screen, but he insisted, "There's something back there, watching us chew." He fired his laser gun into the wall around 0400, hit nothing, just tore through dirt. Hark disarmed him, but Wex kept grinning. "I know what it tastes like now," he whispered. We locked him in the Medici tent. He wouldn't stop chewing his own tongue. By hour 220, people started bleeding, from the gums, from their ears, from their eyes. No injuries, no blunt trauma, just spontaneous bursts. It was like the rations had scraped something loose inside our skulls. Imhal, the tech priest, ran bioscans on those affected. The machine refused to print a diagnosis. Its logic core sputtered static and printed out one phrase again and again. Nutritional error, input not recognized by baseline human pattern. We burned 2 crates. The smoke smelled like burnt hair and cooking oil. Then came the second discovery. Under the bottom layer of ration packs, hidden beneath vacuum insulation, was a second compartment, smaller, tightly sealed, lead-lined. Imhal opened it with sacred cutters. Inside, tiny vials, fluid, pale green, oily, each marked with a cog-engraved purity seal, and a word etched into the metal, supplements. Sergeant Hark ordered them destroyed. Imhal objected. He said they were clearly made by the Mechanicus, possibly gene-balancing serums meant to stabilize soldiers after consuming long-expired rations. Their insurance, he said, fail-safes. Hark asked him a single question: why hide them? We buried the vials under the trench floor, but by morning, they were gone. Only a slick green smear remained where the metal box used to be. At 0500, Gall vanished. Last seen walking into the outer fog, whispering something like, "I can still taste it." We searched the line, followed the churned footprints to the edge of the perimeter mines. The trail stopped just before the wire. Only one thing left, his boots, empty, laces still tied. The supply manifests list the crates as standard nutritional block, batch 2.13A. But Imhal finally cross-checked them against the cogitator logs. That batch doesn't exist. The crates are gone now, not moved. Gone. The storage bunker where they were housed is collapsed, like something sucked the center of it inward. The ground still sags where it stood, and no one remembers eating the last few rations. Somehow we're full, and that's worse. Private Soren hasn't spoken in hours. He stares at his own hands like they're no longer his. When I pressed him, he whispered, "There's something living in the meat." At 0600, I started tasting my own memories. I chewed on my ration slab and remembered home. But the house wasn't mine. The sky was violet. The air buzzed with insect hymns. My siblings had too many eyes, and I remember loving them. I haven't told anyone, but I think I know why the packs were labeled that way. Not human use only, as a warning, but as a lie. To convince us that we still were. The Medici records are missing. Half the picked footage is corrupted. Even the autoquill has begun writing in a dialect we don't recognize, somewhere between Binaric and Low Gothic. One word appears again and again in the margins: assimilation. We are eating to survive, but we are also being eaten. We've seen men die in every way, blown apart, burned alive, begging for their mothers, praying to the emperor, some in silence, some in screaming. But no one asks to be executed, not unless something has gone very wrong. It started with Trooper Kell. He was a scout, quiet, reliable, no signs of trauma. Not until hour 2:05. He walked into the command dugout during rations, straight-backed, eyes forward like he was reporting for duty. And he said, "I've remembered something that isn't mine. I am not clean. You must execute me." We all stared at him, waiting for a punchline. Hark looked up from his data slate and said, "Explain that, soldier." Kell didn't blink. I dreamt with someone else's eyes. I felt them. I tasted the last breath of a world I've never visited, and I liked it. Silence. Worse than silence. Stillness. He was shaking just slightly, like the memory hurt his muscles, like his bones didn't know which shape to hold. Imhal, the tech priest, ordered a neural probe. The Auspex readings made no sense. Neural patterns resembled overlapping signatures. Two identities, one host. Medici Voss whispered, "He's been partitioned, like a cogitator with shared access." And Kell, he smiled. "Someone else is watching through me," he said. "They're patient. They don't want to hurt you. Not yet. They want to learn." We restrained him, psycho-grade shackles, injected mild sedatives, kept him isolated. But within the hour, he'd chewed through half his tongue and was singing. Not words, just sounds, wet vowels, like the echoes of a different kind of language. And blood pooled on the floor, in patterns that didn't reflect the angles of the cell. At 1:50, he started crying, screaming, laughing, slammed his forehead into the wall so hard his skull split. Voss begged the command staff, "Please, for throne's sake, kill him. This isn't repentance, it's a signal." Sergeant Hark authorized it. Execution by last pistol, clean. I was chosen to carry it out. Kell knelt calmly, eyes leaking, mouth twitching with a smile he didn't mean. I asked him if he had any last words. He nodded and whispered, "It's learning how to feel." I pulled the trigger. We cremated the body in a sealed pit. But ash was left behind that didn't burn, a sticky residue, pale and fibrous, like spider silk coiled in loops. Imhal says it isn't organic, but it moved when no one was watching. At hour 1:45, we found a second trooper in the same state, Private Lesnar. Same phrases, same trembling, same plea. "I am not clean, you must execute me." We're up to 5 now, 5 who walked in on their own. All lucid, all asking for death. Some show no symptoms at all, but each one describes foreign memories, a mother's name they never had, a home world that doesn't exist. One even spoke of a sun that hangs upside down in the sky, and a god that breathes through mirrors. They are not infected, they are overwritten. I'm not sleeping anymore, none of us are. We nap in shifts, but it's never enough. Dreams are loud now, like the warp is pressing in through the soil. Corporal Juna woke screaming, said she dreamed of Kel. He wasn't dead, he was digging beneath her eyelids. Sergeant Hark made it official. If anyone requests execution under grounds of mental breach, their statement is to be considered credible. We have a form for it now, a box to check, a line to sign. At 1:35, the Vox started playing back Kel's voice. No one had recorded it. It was just there, looping on every frequency. I am not clean. I am not clean. I am not clean. We changed channels. It followed us. We smashed the Vox unit. It kept speaking from the broken pieces. Now even the trench walls whisper. The wooden beams sweat. There's breathing behind the canvas. One man swore the dirt blinked at him. Another said the laser guns feel wet when held too long. We've stopped asking what's real. The fog is thicker. Not just above the trench, but inside us. I sometimes look at my hands and wonder whose they are. There's a mole on my thumb I swear wasn't there yesterday, and sometimes I remember holding a child I never had, or cleaning a bolt pistol I never owned, or drowning in a language no man speaks. At 1:25, a new soldier came forward, didn't even knock, just walked into the dugout. He had Kel's face, not similar, identical. Down to the scar on the cheek, the old tooth crack, the tone of voice. He saluted and said, requesting assignment. We raised weapons instantly. He didn't move, just smiled that same gentle, broken smile. You executed me, but I liked being here, so I came back. We didn't shoot. None of us could. The air was too heavy. The fog crept in through the roof. Hark finally ordered containment. He's locked in the old bunker, but the lock mechanism keeps resetting. Imhal's logs show no one opening the door, but the subject keeps changing positions between every check-in. Sometimes he's asleep, sometimes standing, sometimes he's gone for hours, but always returns. We don't know how many Kel copies there might be. We stopped counting the shadows. At hour 1:10, Private Bentz asked to be executed, then Trooper Cyan, then Lieutenant Fawn. Each described it the same way. I can feel a presence inside my spine like fingers tapping. And when they blink too slowly, they say they see other faces staring back. We no longer ask why, only how long until it's me. I think I'll ask Hark for the form soon, but first, I need to speak with Kel again, not the one I shot, the one that returned. He says something waits in the fog, and it's remembering how to become flesh again. We used to trust the wire, Vox channels, command relays, perimeter alarms. Now, every line hums with wrongness. At hour 1, we heard the first whisper. It came through the trench comms like static at first, crackling, low, rhythmic. Then, beneath it, a voice. Software fragile, personal. We see you now. Private Donnell was on comms duty. He swore he hadn't touched the dial, swore he never transmitted a word. But the whisper spoke with his voice. Distorted, reversed, but unmistakable, like someone had unraveled his sentences and braided them with something else. Shut it down, Hark ordered. Imhal severed the link, crushed the Vox unit with a servo clamp. It still pulsed. Dead wires don't beat like a heart. At hour 0:57, the perimeter tripwire alarms fired across the southern trench line. We thought we were under assault. Every squad went hot. Auto turrets swiveled toward the breach. But there was no movement, no footsteps, just the whimper of a child caught in a loop, echoing from every speaker. Please, not again, please, please. It wasn't anyone we knew, no children here, not in this mud hole, but the voice. It knew names, our names. Each whisper came with a different voice. Some we'd forgotten, some we'd never heard before. One trooper collapsed when the voice of his dead brother spoke through the wire. At hour 0:53, the last turrets turned inward. No command issued, no data log showed a trigger. They simply reoriented, mechanical shrieks echoing like screams, until they pointed directly into the trench. We were almost gunned down by our own defenses. Imhal cut power to every defense line. Still, the targeting lenses stayed glowing, still following us, like they were watching. We traced the wiring. Every cable led to the relay spire near the old hab bunker. That's when Trooper Wren noticed something. The cables were growing. They'd fused with the trench wall, no longer rubber or metal. They were wet, vein-like, throbbing faintly, some pulsed with faint voices. Imhal took a sample, said it wasn't tech anymore. Organic tech hybrid, grown, not installed. That's when we realized the wire had been listening longer than we knew. Hour 047. The backup Vox flared online. No one touched it. It activated itself, and a recording began. Our own voices, all of us, saying things we'd never said, laughing when we hadn't laughed, begging when we hadn't begged, and in the background, a constant scratching. Not random, patterned, ritualistic. I recognized one line spoken in my own voice. I've always wanted to forget what the Emperor said. I've never said that. I would never think that, and yet it sounded just like me. Tone, inflection, breath, perfectly me. Voss tried to isolate the source, said there was no emitter, the wire itself was transmitting, each strand a voice, each junction a memory, as if the trench's nervous system had woken up. At hour 041, Sergeant Hark collapsed, blood leaking from his nose, eyes rolled back, mouth twitching. He kept whispering the same thing. They're inside the wire, and we are too. They restrained him. He screamed when he saw the comms panel, yelled that it had grown a face. We checked. There was nothing, until someone shined a light on the cracked surface, and we saw the imprint of teeth, human, pressed in metal, like someone bit the Vox unit from the inside. Imhal attempted full relay purging, fed flame through the cable routes, burned the lines for meters in both directions. They screamed, not like tech overloading, not like circuits frying. They screamed, with the voice of Kell, then Donnell, then me. At hour 035, the Vox relay reconnected. We watched it. No one touched it, but the wiring squirmed toward itself, flesh-wrapped wires knitting with twitching precision. The unit reassembled and whispered, "You cut the tongue, not the mind. We've stopped using radios. We use paper notes now, or hand signals, or silence, because the wire doesn't just listen anymore. It understands." One of the wire gangs, troopers sent to destroy the backup conduit, never returned. We found their gear melted into the walls, but their voices, we heard them an hour later, calling out for help, screaming, "It's copying us," and then laughing, not their laughter, something using their memories. At hour 028, the power cut out entirely. Dark, except the wiring glowed, faint blue, pulsing. We watched as lines of script wrote themselves on the trench walls. Not paint, not blood, just static, shaped into words we weren't meant to read. The moment we saw them, Voss seized, collapsed, eyes wide, whispering in binary. 0101, he watches through the signal. 0101, he is the signal. Wundryer the Wundre. At hour 023, someone tried to cut the last wire. The cable coiled around his wrist, pulled him into the trench wall. We dug for 2 hours, no body, only his helmet. Inside it, a new speaker, freshly grown, whispering. We needed a new voice. Thank you, the wire wants us to speak, to transmit, to echo, because that's how it spreads, not with flesh, with information. We asked Imhal how to stop it. He said, there is no more wire, only thought. We asked what that meant. He lifted his robe, showed us his spine, wires rooted into him, fused at every vertebra. They hummed when we got too close. He's part of the system now. So are we. Every prayer, every scream, every memory. The signal has them all. We sleep in silence, but the trench still talks. The mud vibrates, the air carries echoes, every step feels remembered. Hour 017. The trench Vox sputtered to life one last time and played a voice we hadn't heard before. Young, software female. I'm still alive in here, please, help me. It said her name was Lyra, a guardswoman from the 19th, declared KIA 3 months ago. She begged for mercy, begged for death. They made my skin into wire. We turned off every unit, buried the gear, but the whisper kept going, right into our ears, like the wire was inside our skulls now. And now, sometimes I hear myself breathing when I'm not. I speak without speaking, think without knowing, feel listened to. I think I'll cut out my Vox bead. Maybe then the whispers will stop. Maybe then I'll be free. But every time I try, I hear her voice again. Cutting it out only makes room for more. We heard the words before we saw the man who spoke them. No reinforcements, no retreat. They came through the static of the Vox unit. like a sentence etched in ash across our spines. Not barked, not declared, just said. Flat, absolute. Like the Emperor himself had whispered it directly into our marrow. The Vox operator, Tharn, looked up from the set, his face pale beneath layers of soot. "It was him," he said. "Colonel Severin." I blinked. "He's dead." "Then the dead are giving orders now." We were dug into a collapsed munitions trench just east of Grid D16, though you'd have to be mad to try finding that on the map anymore. The lines had collapsed like wet paper. Everything that had once made sense, advanced zones, fallback paths, even cardinal directions, had been burned or drowned or swallowed by the trenches. Still, we waited. Because that's what guardsmen do. We wait to be told who to die for. Jorik leaned against the sandbags, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. "So we just stay here, till the ammo's gone, till we rot." There was no answer. Even the wind didn't bother mocking us anymore. That night the screaming started again. Not battle cries, not the dying, but that high, ululating howl that sounded too long to be human. It rose from no direction and all directions at once, echoing through the trench walls and the bones beneath them. We buried our heads. We chewed on rations that tasted like copper and fungus. Some prayed. Some pressed purity seals to their foreheads and whispered the catechisms of duty until their lips bled. The Vox repeated the same phrase every 2 hours. No reinforcements, no retreat, no coordinates, no clarification, just the mantra of a command that no longer remembered us. On the second morning, when the green fog cleared for a brief hour, we saw the field to our north. Bodies, hundreds, maybe thousands, lying in concentric circles like some heretical mandala, all stripped of armor, all pointing toward a central spike of rebar impaled into the ground, wrapped in lasrafals like offerings. We didn't go near it. Even the sergeant, what was left of him, didn't give the order. The sight was enough to make Jorik vomit, and the rest of us wished the fog would return. By hour 4, the trench walls were moving, number not moving, breathing. I pressed my hand to the wet earth and felt it pulse like a sluggish heartbeat, slow, faint, rhythmic. Tharn was the first to snap. He began tuning the Vox to every known frequency, blood under his fingernails, muttering prayers and curses alike. "I heard them," he said. "I heard them say my name." "Who?" I asked. "The reinforcements. They're here, but upside down." He smashed the Vox unit against the dirt until it sparked, until the only thing it could say was a garbled hum, like a child's voice stuck in a loop. After that, no one spoke again for a long while. Hour 3 passed. We never marked it. No flares, no watches. Just the sound of time stretching, pulling us thinner and thinner. We kept waiting, because hope, even in its dying form, is the last rot to leave a soldier's soul. Then, that night, if night even existed anymore, it came. Not a flare, not a signal, but movement. Dozens of them, climbing over the lip of the trench ahead. Human silhouettes, helmets, flak armor, lasrafals, reinforcements. We stood, staggered, shouted with what little voice we had left. Some of us wept. They didn't answer. They didn't speak. They just stood. And then, when they moved again, it wasn't toward us. It was past us, through us, like they couldn't see we were there. Tharn reached out to one. His hand passed straight through the man's shoulder. A ghost, or a memory, or the warp, taunting us again. "No reinforcements," someone muttered behind me. No one slept after that. Not that we had slept in days. By morning, the trench floor was slick with something that wasn't water. The walls still pulsed, the Vox no longer spoke, and the wind began to carry whispers none of us wanted to understand. Jorik loaded his last 3 shots and passed the remaining charge packs to me. "If I freeze," he said, "you don't wait. You shoot. Deal." I nodded. That was the last real thing anyone said to me. Hour 2 drew close, though we didn't know it by clocks. We knew it by the silence. Even the trench had stopped breathing. That's when the commissar came. Alone, limbs bent wrong, half a face. He didn't look at us, just walked the trench line, lips moving, eyes white. blood trailing behind him. Jorik saluted. I didn't, because I realized finally terribly what he was. Not a man, not a ghost, but the embodiment of the message we had refused to accept. No reinforcements, no retreat. That's all he was. A walking sentence, a command made flesh. He stopped at the head of our trench, turned and pointed behind us to the dead zone, to the hell we were meant to charge. I looked around. Tharn was gone. The others stared at the commissar like he'd handed them a holy writ, and then they climbed the ladder, one by one. Silent, no rallying cry, no final prayer, just obedience. I stayed, because something inside me, some splinter of self still clinging to logic, knew there was nothing out there but death. When the trench was empty and only the commissar remained, he turned and looked at me for the first time. His mouth opened, and in a voice that wasn't his, wasn't human, he said, "You were forgotten, but the war remembers." Then he dissolved, not vanished, not fled, dissolved, like smoke sucked into the earth. That was the moment I realized there would be no extraction, no survivor's tale, no medals or remembrance or even final moments, just 6 hours, then 5, then 4, and still, no reinforcements, no retreat. The moment the last man climbed over the trench wall, the hourglass broke. We didn't feel it like an explosion. There was no impact, no tremor, just the sensation that something underneath reality had bent, then buckled, then split. We were in a bunker then. I remember crawling back inside after the commissar vanished, dragging what was left of Tharn's Vox pack behind me like it still meant something. But when I looked up, I wasn't in the bunker anymore. I was back in the Hab unit where I grew up on Kalthros. My mother's voice in the kitchen, the scent of recaf, my brother's laugh echoing from a hallway that shouldn't have existed in this war. I blinked, and the bunker returned, cold, wet, mold-riddled, cracked under the weight of the front. But something was wrong. The door was sealed from the inside, and there were no hinges, no way it could have been closed. I turned and saw myself, sitting in the corner, back to the wall, helmet off, face pale, staring at the bolter in his lap like it held the answer to a question no one had ever dared to ask. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. I staggered back and hit the bulkhead, and it shivered, not shook, shivered like skin, like something organic. I blinked again, and now the room was filled with more of me, sitting in a row like a firing squad, some crying, some dead, some whispering phrases that bent in on themselves like broken scripture. "You already did it," one said. "You never left," said another. "You're still up there," whispered the one with the bolter. Then the door opened, and Jorik stepped in, but not as I remembered him. His armor was fused to his skin. His left arm was a stump of melted ceramite and bone. His face was a hollow cavity filled with echoing voices. "You froze," he said. I tried to answer, but my voice came out backwards. "You didn't shoot," he said. His one good eye locked onto mine, and he smiled. "Now you'll wait here forever." I screamed, I think. Or maybe I collapsed. Maybe I blinked again, and the world folded into itself like paper in a fire. Time didn't pass in seconds anymore. It dripped, viscous, hot, heavy, from the ceiling, from the Vox unit, from the wounds in my memory. Hour 2 had begun, and the bunker was no longer a place, it was a punishment. At some point, if time still meant anything, I heard scratching behind the wall, claws, or maybe fingernails, maybe both. I pressed my ear to the plasteel and heard a voice chanting in a child's rhythm. "The Emperor's light burns too bright, close your eyes or lose your sight. The Emperor's word weighs too much, bite your tongue or lose your touch." Then silence, and then a knock, just one, sharp, hollow, right behind my head. I ran. There was no corridor before, but now there was. A long hallway carved through mud and bone and screaming steel. Doors on either side, each one marked with names I remembered from boot camp. Each door had a window, and each window showed a different wall. The door marked Private Lestrude showed the gas fields on Crass. I saw him drown in toxin with a smile on his face. The door marked Corporal Resh showed a command tent where he was being eaten by the things we once called medics. The door marked my name, showed an empty cot and a child sleeping on it. I kept walking because walking meant not thinking, because thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant screaming. Eventually I came to a ladder. I climbed. It went on forever. When I finally reached the top, I was in the trench again. But the sky had melted. Literally, blue sky, black smoke, streaks of fire, all dripping downward like candle wax. I reached out and caught a drop on my finger. It burned through the bone. I screamed, fell back into the mud, and realized there was no pain, just awareness, just memory. The world was breaking. The bunker was breaking. Me. Shapes crawled across no man's land now. Tall, bent, thin as whispers, shimmering like oil on water. They walked in rows, but their heads faced backward. They had no eyes, just vox grills bolted into where mouths should be. And they were chanting something I couldn't hear with my ears, only feel in my teeth. We were the reinforcements. We never left. You are the retreat. Hour 2 bled on. Every time I tried to shoot myself awake, my hands came back empty. Every time I tried to run, I arrived back at the bunker. And each time I did, it looked a little more like my mother's kitchen, or my first foxhole, or the back of the chimera I'd bled in. Until finally, it wasn't a place anymore, just a feeling. Tharn's voice returned, but not over vox. It came from the mud itself. Time's done, brother. I clawed at the wall. Only 1 hour left, I screamed. You know what that means. I curled in the corner. You either stand, the bunker breathed, or you melt. And somewhere, beneath all that collapsing sanity, I remembered something the drill sergeant once said. Retreat isn't running. Retreat is dying on your feet, so others can live on theirs. But here, there were no others. There was no war left to win. Just the bunker. Just me. Just 1 hour left, and nothing holding it together. The vox crackled before I heard it. Then it screamed. Not words, not voices, just a sound, like someone dragging a wet blade across raw metal. Long, slow, relentless. I slammed my fist against the unit. It didn't help. Tharn was gone. Corin was gone. Even Jorik, silent since the last shelling, was gone now. Only the vox remained, and it kept speaking, not to me, as me. Fire Team Helios, requesting reinforcement, holding south flank, enemy position uncertain. We are holding. That was my voice, my cadence, my vocabulary, even the rasp in my throat when I forget to hydrate. But I never said that. I checked the vox log. No outgoing message had been sent in over 2 hours. Still, the machine chattered, relentless, precise, repeating phrases I never spoke but somehow remembered. I see them. They're coming. They're not human. I whispered that once, in my own head, after the first hallucination. Back when I thought the war could still be won. Now the vox was saying it out loud, over and over, broadcasting my fear, my failure, my private madness. I reached to rip the vox cables out and stopped cold. There were fingernails in the vox grill, human, split, fresh, wedged into the mesh like someone had tried to crawl inside or tried to get out. My hands trembled. Behind me, the room pulsed, not with heat, not with sound, but with awareness. We are in the last hour. That much was clear. I saw the chronos stamped in the dirt beside Tharn's bones. It counted down in slow imperial seconds. 60, 59, 58. But when I blinked, it was back at 60 again. A loop, a trap. Time itself was decaying, just like the corpses around me, just like my thoughts. The vox kept broadcasting. New voices now, my mother's, the sergeant's, even my own voice from basic training. I'm not ready, sir, it repeated. I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. Over and over until the words blurred into static. Then another phrase. Permission to die denied. And laughter. I crawled to the trench lip, hoping to catch a breeze. Something real. Something to remind me that there was a sky. That this wasn't hell. But when I looked up, there was no sky. Just that melted wax again. Dripping, flickering. Like the battlefield was lit by a dying candle held by something immense, watching. Every drop that fell screamed when it hit the earth. One sounded like Tharn, another like Corin, another like me. I dropped back inside the trench and landed on a rib cage. I didn't remember it being there, but it wore my name tag. The vox spoke again. This time it said something I'd never heard before. Order received. A chill spread down my spine. I hadn't given any orders. The squad was gone. The company was gone. The war was still happening, but not outside, not anymore. It was in here. The Vox clicked, and I heard footsteps, boots in mud, coming closer. I readied my last rifle, shouldered it, aimed at the bunker door, but I was already holding it at my own head. The figure in the door wasn't me, not exactly. He looked older, hungrier. His armor was rusted with memory, his eyes hollow with things he hadn't seen. Yet, he didn't raise a weapon, just spoke. "You told them to hold." I shook my head. "I never said that." "Yes," he said, stepping closer. "You did, right before they died." His voice was my voice, but with the guilt stripped bare. "You didn't mean to say it, but you did." And the Vox remembered. I fell back. The chrono hit 0. The second to last hour was gone. He crouched beside me and placed something in my hand. A data slate, cracked, blood-smeared, old. It showed a voxel transcript, dozens of them, all from me, all sent after I stopped speaking. Dozens of lies. Enemy routed. Morale stable. Squad reinforced. Air support imminent. Victory assured. None of it was true, but it had my seal. "They're building a new war from your ghost," he said. "A clean war, a hopeful war, the kind that ends in statues." He grinned. "Too bad you're still alive to see it." I stared at him, at me. "Are you real?" He tilted his head, then his face peeled open like paper tearing down the fold. Inside was the Vox grill, and it was still speaking, broadcasting, screaming. "We held, we held, we held, we held." I tore out the Vox, smashed it against the ground, again and again and again, until there was only metal and blood. And still, I heard it, from behind my own teeth, because I was the signal now. Every breath, every blink, every thought I tried to suppress was being echoed outward, not by machine, by memory, by the air, by the thing that called itself me. We are not soldiers anymore. We are recorders, living black boxes, screaming things into the ether so that someone, somewhere, can sculpt a version of the war that makes sense. A war of bravery, of sacrifice, of loyalty, not the war I lived, not the war I'm dying in. The final message the Vox whispered before it died was this: all units accounted for, and then, no survivors. The last hour begins now. I don't know if I'll survive it. I don't know if I already did, but I know one thing. The Vox still works, even if I'm gone, and it's going to keep telling my story, even if it was never mine to begin with. The wind carried the banner, if you could call it wind, if you could call it a banner. It flapped above the trench like it had always been there, like the battlefield wanted me to see it. A flag, long, tattered, stitched from skin, human, pale, scrawled with ink that bled like veins. Our regiment's sigil was burned into the center, but wrong. The Aquila had no eyes, and beneath its wings the words, "Victory without witness." I watched it move without breeze, like it breathed, like it pulsed. I don't know who raised it. None of us had orders. None of us had orders anymore. The officers were all dead, or they had stopped speaking, or they had sewn their own mouths shut. That was happening now too. Self-silencing. We called it flag sickness, because whoever raised that thing first, they did it with their own hands. They peeled off the flesh of the fallen and made a banner, a statement, a last act of loyalty, I think, or madness. I saw Anders do it next. He wasn't sick, he was scared. Scared that no one would remember us, scared that our deaths wouldn't matter, scared that command would rewrite it all, as if we never held the line, as if we never existed. So he added his brother's skin to the banner, said it was an honor, said it was what he would have wanted. Then he walked into the no man's land and knelt and waited until something dragged him down. We didn't call it desecration, we called it remembrance. Now the flag hangs above every trench line, stitched from dozens, maybe hundreds, old flesh, new flesh, even some bearing brand marks from the penal units. Someone tried to sew Vox static into the fabric. Others carved the words of the Imperial Creed into muscle, but they always added the same final line: "We served, now let them see." That's what broke Callus, She'd survived everything. Gas attacks, psyker screams, artillery misfires, even the thing in the water tank. But she couldn't survive the idea of being forgotten. She whispered over and over, "We died for nothing, unless someone knows." Then she cut off the last 3 fingers of her right hand and added them to the flag. It didn't flap anymore after that. It shivered. There's no honor guard left, just this thing we've made, this cathedral of flesh, fluttering in the ash winds of a dead world, and I keep staring at it, because I can't tell anymore if it's waving or watching. Someone tried to burn it, just once. I think it was Voss. He found a flamer in the ruins of Command Bunker Gamma. He screamed something about the Emperor, said this wasn't faith, said this was heresy, lit it up like a pyre. It burned, bright and loud, but it didn't scream. We did. Every soldier still breathing felt their skin crack, blister, peel, not just heat, memory. The fire carried every name sewn into that flag and threw them back at us, one by one, like thunder in the bones. Voss's eyes burst. He's still alive, somehow. We keep him beneath a tarp. He whispers words that aren't in low Gothic, names that don't belong here, coordinates that don't exist. Now no one touches the flag, but no one tries to take it down either. We add to it, quietly, a strip of scalp, a thumb bone, an eyelid. Offerings. We don't say why. We don't need to. It knows. I had a dream, or a waking vision. Couldn't tell anymore. The flag was standing upright, like a man, its seams unraveling into arms and fingers. The aquila at its chest opened into a rib cage, and inside was a child's skull. It turned to me, and it saluted. Then it whispered, "There were never reinforcements. You were always the last." And I believed it. The ground here is red with truth, not blood. Truth. Every time we bury someone, the soil vomits them back. But not the way they were. They come back stitched, seamed, transformed, into parts for the flag, or for something beneath it. I've seen movement under the trench boards, a shape made from too many arms. It doesn't attack. It gathers. It built a pole from femurs. It braided cords from nerves. It climbs, sometimes halfway up the trench wall, but it never reaches the surface. Not yet. I think it's waiting for the last man to fall, so it can wear the banner and stand. There's a rhythm now. Every 60 minutes, the Vox whispers a new name. The banner gains a new stitch. The shape beneath us hums in the walls. It's not a song. Not exactly. But it sounds like a funeral before the body is dead. I tried to report it, to send one final warning through the astropath node, but the only message that would transmit was, "This is who we are now." I didn't write it, but the blood on the keypad matched mine. I asked the chaplain what's left of him, what it meant. He didn't speak, just opened his robe, showed me his chest. He had carved it there, deep, crooked, exact. Our flag is made of skin. Then he bled out, laughing. It wasn't just metaphor, it wasn't protest, it wasn't madness, it was identity. I know what I must do. My squad is gone. My name doesn't matter anymore, but my memory does. I took the knife from Tharn's pack, still sharp, still soaked in something too thick to be blood. I removed a square from my thigh, didn't scream, offered it to the flag. I waited. It didn't move. But I swear the sky dimmed a little more, like it was pleased. I sat down, back to the trench wall, laser gun across my lap. The chrono read 0043, 17 minutes to the last minute. I'll hold it as long as I can, but I'm not doing it for victory. I'm doing it so the last thing this war sees is a soldier who remembers what happened and leaves behind something that can't be rewritten. Even if all that's left of me is a strip of skin waving in the dark. It started with silence. Not the kind that comes after a shelling. Not the kind that settles when the wounded stop moaning. This was deeper, older. A silence that pressed into your ears, then deeper into your bones, until even your thoughts went quiet. And then the ground began to breathe. We thought it was another tremor at first. Hivequakes weren't uncommon this deep in the crust. Warp tremors either. The chaplain had names for them. Tectonic penance. The Emperor's grinding wheel. But this didn't shake. This rose. Beneath our boots, the soil pushed upward, not cracked, not split, pushed. One trench section lifted clean from its supports, steel and mud bending like fabric. A wave of dirt rolling across the line, then a scream, one I recognized, Brenner. He didn't shout for help, he shouted, "It's under us!" Then his voice folded in half, not cut off, folded, like the air itself couldn't carry it anymore. I ran, not forward, not back. There was nowhere safe now, just the flickering perimeter lights, the distant smoke of burning artillery platforms, and the smell of something wet and old and breathing, like lungs filled with moss. We thought the storm would come from above, from the enemy lines, from the fleets in orbit, from the sky. But there were no drop pods, no bombardments, no thunder, only earth rising like water, only trenches melting inward, only the shape emerging without form. Rota saw it next. He was firing into the mud, at first blindly, then methodically, each lasbolt lighting the dirt for a fraction of a second. Then he stopped, held his rifle like a candle, whispered something into the scope. I asked what he saw. He said, "It's looking up." From where? He pointed at the dirt, then at his own boots, then at mine. "It's under everyone now," he said. "It's in the soil like blood." When the vox crackled, we flinched like it had screamed, but it didn't scream. It whispered, same voice we'd heard for the past hour, but this time it said nothing. No orders, no distress, just breathing, and a single sound, a wet syllable, half a word, spoken like it was being remembered by the dirt. Our Auspex tech tried to triangulate it. His screen displayed concentric circles, radiating out like ripples from a stone. But the center wasn't on the battlefield. It was beneath it, deep, at the bedrock layer. Coordinates matched the original burial zone, where we dumped the unidentifiable dead, where the bodies had no tags, no prayers, no oaths, just thrown in by shovel, piled in darkness. And now the storm was rising from them. It wasn't weather, it wasn't war, it was hunger with memory. That's when the dirt opened, not cracked, not split, opened like a wound, a radial burst of earth, clods flung high like fireworks. And from the center, nothing, no body, no beast, no weapon, just a void, black and raw and pulling. It didn't draw air, it drew sound. Last fire faded near it, screams muffled. Even the trench alarms dimmed, like they were being turned off one by one. Garen crawled to the edge to throw a grenade into it. He pulled the pin, said a prayer, then stopped. Because the pin was gone, so was the grenade. So was his hand, up to the wrist, cleanly missing. No blood, no pain, just absence, like the hole had taken a bite from time. The tech priest declared it a localized null event, said it wasn't possible, said it violated 16 Mechanicus axioms. Then his voice broke. He didn't choke, didn't scream, it just broke, backward. He began reciting everything he'd ever said in reverse, like time was rewinding only his voice. His lips moved out of sync, then stopped. His eyes looked at us like they'd never seen faces before. Then he walked into the hole, like it was a corridor. We never saw him fall. He just disappeared, into the moment. Something else climbed out next. It wasn't a body, it was a shadow with form. Long, wet, human-shaped but stitched from void. It carried no weapons, it didn't need any. We opened fire anyway. Lasbolts passed through it, like light through water. Then the water screamed. I don't remember what happened for the next few minutes. There are gaps now, in my memory, in my helmet feed. The playback is static, then screams, then nothing. I woke beneath an overturned munitions crate, covered in blood that smelled like salt and iron and incense, and I was holding someone's hand. Not attached, just a hand, with a name tattooed on the palm, for the Emperor. The storm didn't stop, it just moved, like a thinking weather front, like vengeance with legs. It walks now, not fast, not loud, but with purpose, across the trench grid, beneath the soil, following the blood, following the regret. Everywhere it passes, soldiers forget how to pray, or worse, they pray to it. I found Private Illis under a tarp. She was whispering, said she heard her sister's voice coming from the storm, said the soil was speaking in the cadence of home. Then she pulled out her eyes, not with pain, with relief. Now I can see where it's going, she said. Then she pointed down. We no longer dig trenches. The ground refuses it. It collapses every hole, reclaims every shovel, like it doesn't want us to bury the dead anymore, because it already has. And they're not dead. They're marching beneath us, in time with the storm, with no boots, no lungs, just bones and memory. We saw the flag again, the one from earlier, the one made of skin. It was flying now, but sideways, dragged along the mud by nothing, a banner without wind, sailing toward the hole. I followed it, not by choice, by instinct, by dread, because I think the storm is calling, to all of us, to everything left behind. It doesn't kill, it collects, and it's coming for the last hour. We marked the hour with silence. No more time calls, no more regimental chimes, no more praise the throne from the vox, only the sound of dirt shifting and something moving beneath it, slower now, as if it was listening. The medici tent had collapsed the day before. When we went back to scavenge for stims, we found a man still breathing, trapped beneath steel struts, crushed, half buried, but alive, one of ours. Nameplate, Sarn, ID tag, burnt, lungs, functional. Even though the bomb had hit the tent directly, I remember that blast. I'd seen the fire roll up like a living hand. I'd watched the corpsman inside turn to shadows. I'd smelled what was left, but Sarn was still warm, still whispering. We dug him out, not because we hoped, but because he was asking questions, over and over. Same phrase, did I come back right? Not, am I wounded? Not, how long was I under? Just that, did I come back right? He had no burns, no broken bones, but his heartbeat was wrong. Medicae Heran checked his vitals, said the man had 3 pulses, one in the chest, one in the neck, and a third, deeper, under the ribs, too low, too slow, not human, not entirely. We laid him on a stretcher, strapped him down. He kept whispering the same phrase. Tell me if I'm still him. Not alive, not safe. Still him. The others thought he was shell-shocked. Medici trauma, common in the last hours. But something about the way he moved, the way his eyes darted like he was searching inside his own head. It wasn't fear. It was doubt. Sarn didn't sleep. We know because we left someone with him. Jex, young, still believed in medals. He sat beside the cot with a shock maul in hand, promised he'd alert us if Sarn changed. Next morning, we found the cot empty, Sarn gone. Jex too, but Jex's skin was still there, folded neatly in the corner, like a discarded uniform, his face placed on top, eyes open, mouth shaped in a perfect O. We found footprints leading from the tent, but not outward, inward. The soil was drawn into itself, a spiral path toward a collapsed tunnel mouth. Inside, darkness and wet breath. Sergeant Voss said to seal the tunnel. No time for rescue, but I took my lamp pack and followed anyway, not for Sarn, for Jex, or what was left. The tunnel pulsed. I don't mean the air, I mean the walls. The soil was breathing, drawing in with each step, exhaling mold and heat. The deeper I went, the more I heard Sarn's voice, not echoing, not bouncing, just present, everywhere, as if he was narrating the tunnel into existence. He said, I was alive when the bomb hit. I remember dying, but the dirt remembered me more. I found him at the bottom, naked, kneeling, arms outstretched towards something glowing, a verus ember, pulsing like a heart, but not one I recognized. It was shaped like a star but beating, and it bled light. Sarn turned. He was smiling. It let me back in. He pointed at the ember. I traded the burn for memory. The bomb forgot me, but the soil didn't. I asked him what he meant. He said, you ever wonder where the dead go when we don't remember their names? They wait, just under the blast line. That's when I realized Sarn didn't have a shadow, not even in full light. He was lit from all sides but cast no reflection. His feet didn't disturb the ground, and he wasn't breathing anymore. The ember pulsed again, and from the soil behind him, dozens of arms began to rise, not full bodies, just arms. Some still wore guard uniforms, some had tags embedded in the bone. One still clutched a melted laser gun, all reaching forward, all toward the ember, or to Sarn. I fired. Lasbolt struck his torso. He blinked, took a step back, then smiled again. Doesn't hurt here, he said. Not when your already ashen memory stitched you together. Then he turned, walked straight into the ember, and vanished. The arms followed, one by one, until only the hole remained, and the silence. I don't know how I got out, but when I came back to the surface, the trench line was gone, replaced by a flat field of black dirt. No bodies, no tents, no voices, only my squad, standing in a circle, all of us covered in ash. None of us spoke, because we all heard it, that same whisper. I was alive when the bomb hit. I remember you. And then one of us collapsed, not from injury, from weight of memory. He said he'd seen his own death, said it was standing behind him smiling, said it called him San. So we burned him, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. We burned the name too. That night we all took off our dog tags, buried them in the mud, unmarked, unblessed. We didn't want to be remembered anymore because now we knew. It wasn't just death watching us, it was everything we forgot, everything we left behind in ash and mud. And it had a voice now, a face, a name we almost recognized. The bomb had killed San, but memory rebuilt him, wrong, incomplete, but alive enough, just enough to walk, to speak, to remind us that nothing in war stays dead for long. Not if we remember it wrong, not if the soil still knows your name. They told us we'd die, that was never the lie. From the moment we signed the enlistment slip, from the moment the munitorum stamped our fates in triplicate and blood, from the first lasgun drill and chant of glory in death, penance in life, we knew. Every guardsman knows. We were promised death, but not this, not what we're living in now. Death used to mean something, a clean bolt through the skull, a lasgut rupture through your side, a scream, a moment, and then the Emperor's light. But this isn't death. This is what lingers when death forgets to finish. I don't remember how long it's been since the last Medicaid check or the last food drop. We haven't eaten in hours, but no one is hungry anymore. We haven't slept in days, but no one blinks. The trench line is quiet, too quiet, and not just muted, but like sound itself is avoiding this place. Even our weapons are wrong. Laser guns refuse to spark. Power packs won't hold charge. Las coils shimmer with static images of faces we recognize but know are dead. I saw my mother's smile in the sight lens. Then it burned out. I asked Sergeant Voss if he remembered the death toll. He said he couldn't count anymore. Not that he forgot the numbers. He forgot what counting meant. Last night, the sky opened up again. Not for shells, not for reinforcements, but for a voice. It came from above, but also beneath our feet. Like the world was hollow, and something inside had finally learned to speak. It said, "You asked for an ending. We offer you endurance instead." We covered our ears. Didn't help. It was already inside us. The words scratched against the bone. We felt it in the marrow. That voice knew our names. Not our rank, not our serials, but our real names. The ones from before the guard. The ones we hadn't heard since childhood. Guardsman Mika screamed when it said his, clawed at his ears until they bled, tried to rip out his own tongue. He said, "If it knows me, it can find me. If it can find me, it can wear me." We restrained him, tied him to the ration crate. Next morning, the crate was empty. So was the rope, and in his place, a pile of wet teeth, and a nameplate, Mika, but scrawled in handwriting that wasn't his. We were promised death. We trained for death. We even rehearsed our own burial rites. But no one ever warned us that we might outlive the war, that we might still walk after the end, that something in this dirt feeds not on flesh, but on duration. There's a sound now, constant, beneath the vox static, a low churning noise, like metal boiling in blood. Tech adept Verin called it signal fermentation, said the comms lines were repeating things that were never sent. He started logging the distortions. On the third cycle, he started answering them. On the fifth, he pulled out his own eyes and whispered, "Now I can see what the Vox sees." He's still alive, somehow. We feed him water from a cracked canteen. He never moves, but his teeth grind names while he sleeps. We're trying to hold the line, but the line doesn't exist anymore. The trenches have shifted, literally. Where we dug in yesterday isn't where we woke up today. Corporal Dellas tried to mark the edges, drove a stake into the wall, tied a rope to his wrist. The next morning, the rope ran straight up into the sky and vanished. Delus is still here, but he's not speaking anymore. He just hums the regimental hymn backwards. I found a shell casing today that was still warm, but there was no impact, no crater, no sound, just the casing and a message scratched inside. We were never supposed to hear the promise. They promised us death. They lied. This is longer. This is worse. We found the captain, the real one, not the thing wearing his voice now. He was inside the comms relay station, bent over, neck snapped backward, still mouthing orders, but the words were in binary. We watched as the servo skulls typed it out. Tell them the Emperor thanks their delay. Not sacrifice, not victory, delay. Someone, somewhere, wanted us to keep standing, not fighting, not winning, just standing, like statues of failure, so someone else could count the corpses. But we're not corpses, not yet. We're worse, we're residual, like smoke that doesn't fade, pain that remembers, names without voices, mouths without names. We're not soldiers anymore, we're inventory, held in place by hope that was weaponized against us. I asked Duran why he kept loading his rifle when we haven't fired a shot in days. He said, I want to be ready for the moment when killing becomes possible again. I think I understood. There's a man in the next trench now. No armor, no tags, face scraped blank, hands twisted backward. He watches us from behind the wire, doesn't move, doesn't blink. But every time we look away, he's closer. We've stopped giving him a name, because names mean memory, and memory brings things back, and we've had enough of returns. We were promised death. We signed for it, prepared for it, believed in it. But this isn't death. This is something waiting between breaths. Something that claps when you almost die but don't quite make it. Something that feeds on the crawl of seconds when no one's watching but everything is listening. Now we pray without lips. Now we walk without footprints. Now we wear our own bones like borrowed uniforms. And still we wait. Not for victory, not for rescue. Just for the moment when someone finally says, you may lie down, and mean it. But even then, I know this war won't end, because it was never a war of bullets, only of remnants, and we're the proof. That war doesn't need survivors, only witnesses. They say when officers die, the regiment dies with them. They say the chain of command is sacred, divine even, etched into the soul of every guardsman like a litany carved in bone. But what if the officer never died? What if he just kept watching, watching without eyes? Captain Heros was the one who made us believe we'd survive, not because he said we would, but because he looked like someone who already had. He bore scars across half his face, his uniform permanently stiff with dried blood, a bolt pistol strapped to his hip like a holy relic. Heros didn't speak often, but when he did, you listened. Even if your stomach was empty, even if your squad was ash, you listened. Because Heros looked at you with a stare that pierced straight through the rot. And you thought, maybe he sees something past this. I found Heros again today. I say again because I've seen him before, or pieces of him. Reflections in puddles that shouldn't exist. His voice on Vox channels that have long since melted. A boot print on the wrong side of the trench, and the feeling that you're being evaluated, observed. It happened just after our last scout patrol vanished. I sent 2 men down the east line. 30 minutes later, only their flak armor came back. No bodies, no blood, just the empty shells folded neatly like they'd undressed themselves. That's when the Vox unit activated, on its own. Old, broken, unpowered, but it came alive, humming, then words. His voice, clear, calm, like a morning briefing before a massacre. Stand fast, soldiers. The Emperor sees through your discipline. Voss collapsed. He'd served under Heros directly, said it couldn't be him. Said they found Hera's body weeks ago. Limbs severed, head gone, tags melted into his chest. But when we turned to the trench wall, something had been burned into it. Letters. Blocky. Fresh. Still steaming. I never stopped commanding. We went looking. Not because we believed, but because we couldn't not look. Like moths to a hanging. We found him sitting upright in what remained of the command dugout. Uniform intact. Boots polished. Chest armor pristine. Everything just as it was the day he briefed us on Operation Pale Knife, except his face was gone, not scarred, gone, smooth, blank, like wet parchment pulled across a skull. Where his eyes had been, there were 2 tiny pinholes, and they were bleeding light. Jonas tried to back away, stepped on a discarded purity seal. The seal ignited. A holy flame, but not golden. White, bone white. Heros's head turned toward the sound. No eyes, but we felt it. The weight of attention. It pressed into our lungs like a falling world. He opened his mouth and a soundless scream filled the bunker. I felt it in my teeth. It wasn't noise. It was judgment. A litany of failure, guilt, cowardice. And yet, somehow, I found myself saluting. We all did. Our bodies moved without command, without permission. We saluted him like loyal sons. Because what else do you do when the dead officer won't let go? He didn't move, not once, but every time I blinked, he was closer. By the time I looked away and looked back, he was standing. No footsteps, no gesture, just upright. His arms still behind his back. A commander reviewing his line. Corbin started muttering under his breath, kept saying, "We're out of time. We've been out of time since hour 4. I asked him what he meant. He said, he never blinked, and now we're in the blink, inside it. I think I understand. That night, we slept without sleep, laid down in ritual, eyes closed, weapons across our chests, the way Heros taught us, discipline, even in death. But we dreamed. Oh, throne, we dreamed. Not memories, not fears, but command drills, field exercises in a place that didn't exist. We ran scenarios inside a trench made of brass teeth, every decision punished, every hesitation watched, and in the sky above, no stars, only 2 bleeding pinpricks of light, watching. I awoke with a data slate clenched in my fist. It wasn't mine. None of us carry slates. It had a single entry, a mission log, dated 4 days from now. Title, Last Stand Initiated, signed Captain Heros. But instead of a seal, there was a single drop of dried blood, and beneath it, words, "You will finish what I could not. Eyes or no eyes, orders remain." No one spoke the rest of the shift. Even the wind seemed muted. But at midnight, as we rotated watch, we heard boots. Not ours. Marching, measured, perfect, coming from nowhere. And then, the scent of incense, old parchment, gun oil, and rot. Heros doesn't lead the war anymore. He is the war. His gaze is the timing of the shelling. His silence is the reason comms drop. His absence is the cause of every wrong turn, every lost squad. He doesn't bark commands now. He writes them on your thoughts. I caught myself today repeating a litany I've never learned. Something about final endurance protocol. Mika said it sounded like the suicide command issued in doomed outposts. But I wasn't trying to die. I was just following orders from someone who doesn't breathe. We tried burning the dugout. Used promethium, used holy fire, chanted every benediction we knew. It burned, and yet, he's still there. Every time we close our eyes, every time we look into reflective glass, every time we stare too long at the command diagram of the trench, there's a shadow in the captain's chair. No face, no eyes, but a spine of iron and a will that won't sleep. Sergeant Voss finally cracked. He knelt before the last foxhole and asked aloud, "Captain, do we still stand?" No reply, only the sound of his own heartbeat getting louder and louder until it broke into static. Then one line on the Vox, "You do, because I told you to. We're not following orders anymore. We are the orders, and he is the gaze that keeps us upright even when the Emperor forgets our names. He doesn't need eyes. He has us." It started when I walked across the gravel, nothing strange, just the usual crunch beneath the boots, but then the gravel echoed, louder than it should have, louder than anything else, and it sounded like screaming. Not rock, not soil, not gear, screaming. Hour 1 is the longest hour of all. The officers used to say the first hour of battle breaks you. They lied. It's the last, the hour when you've already died inside, but your body keeps moving because it doesn't know what else to do. That's where we are now. I can't remember my own voice. Haven't spoken aloud in hours. None of us have. Not because we're ordered to be silent, but because the trench has become aware. Every footstep, every shift of fabric, every gear buckle, it responds with echoes that aren't echoes. They don't bounce off walls, they follow you, like memory or regret. Jonas heard his own scream in the mud. bent down to tie his boot, and heard himself from yesterday begging for a medici that never came. Mika swore she heard her mother's voice, telling her to keep her chin up, telling her she was proud. Her mother died on Virelia 9th, 15 years ago. It's not the trench anymore. It's the place where we remember everything too loudly. Our one is turning us inside out. We used to use sound to stay sane, chanting litanies, clicking comms, singing crude marching songs. Now sound is the enemy. Voss stepped off the boardwalk onto the bare dirt, sank only a few centimeters, but the ground screamed, and not just once. It repeated the scream, drawn out, longer than any breath. 5 seconds, 10, 15, and then it stopped. Dead, like someone hit pause. And all of us were staring at him, at his boot, at the hole it made, and no one breathed, because we all knew what was next. The scream played backward, the exact same sound, in reverse. The dirt undisturbed, the footprint gone, and Voss had aged 20 years in his face. He didn't speak after that, just stared down at his own legs, whispering, "This ground knows us. This ground has kept the pain. Every death was recorded." We tried to walk softer, but it didn't matter. The trench doesn't care how softly you walk. It hears your intentions, and if you hesitate, if you dread what might be beneath the next footstep, it feeds on that, and it shows you. I stepped onto a piece of decking. It looked solid, flat, even reinforced, but as soon as my heel touched it, the scream that echoed was mine, from a week ago, when I saw Jiren get torn in half. I didn't scream then, not out loud, just in my mind, but now I heard it, projected from the wood, clear as vox. My own grief, laid bare, echoed back at me from a dead thing, and then the next step echoed, with Jiren's laugh, from before the war, from the card game in the troop hold. That laugh, that deep, stupid, unforgettable laugh, somehow. The ground had it, stored it, saved it until now. We keep marching because there's nowhere to stop. If you rest, the trench doesn't just echo your steps. It starts whispering them back before you take them, predicting, repeating, trapping you in a loop of memories you never voiced. Mika was the first to break. She sprinted across the open causeway, ignoring the sounds. Her boots left no prints, but with each step, the trench screamed someone else's death. Hundreds of them, hundreds of cries. Children, civilians, lovers, strangers, too many to know. And each scream sounded like it came from inside our own skulls. She dropped, not from a bullet, not from shrapnel, from the weight of every step she'd ever taken in a war she never chose. I dragged her back. She wasn't breathing at first, but when she gasped, she screamed. Not in pain, not in fear, but in relief, like she'd finally remembered something she wasn't supposed to. I asked her what she saw. She said, "I saw the day I was conscripted. I saw my sister beg me not to go, and I saw myself laugh like it was all a joke." Then she said, "Every step echoes what we didn't mean to carry. We stopped walking, but the trench didn't. It kept echoing, like footsteps of ghosts still pacing ahead, like our futures already unfolding without us." I tried to block my ears. Didn't help. The sound doesn't come from the trench. It comes through it, like bone-conducted memory, like pain hardwired into matter. We heard one last thing, the scream of a man we'd never met, high-pitched, not military, civvy, begging in a language none of us spoke, but every syllable felt right, like we'd known him once, fought beside him, let him die, even if we hadn't. And then, silence, true silence. No crunch, no scream, no memory. We had stepped into the center of the trench, and it was listening. We didn't speak, but we all heard it. A breath, a massive slow breath, like the trench was filling its lungs with everything we had left. And then a word, from beneath the soil, not above, beneath, closer. Mika dropped her rifle. Voss fell to his knees. I just stared at my boots and watched them sink half an inch, not in mud, not in ash, in dust. The ground is made of us now. The dead, yes, but more than that. The weight of every choice, every step, every act of duty we never questioned. I took one more step, just one, and the scream that echoed was from tomorrow. My own voice, crying out from a place I haven't yet reached, begging for someone to stop me. But I didn't stop. I took another, and the scream got louder, then another, and it became a chorus, all of them. The ones I couldn't save, the ones I forgot, The ones I ordered forward into fire, all of them screaming at once, at me, from me, and still I marched, because this is war, and in war, every step echoes a scream. I count the bullets every time I breathe. It's not a ritual, not superstition, just necessity. There is only one left, one round in the magazine, one whisper of death, and I've stopped pretending it's meant for the enemy. I checked the chamber 20 minutes ago, clicked the mag release, slid the last round in slow, said nothing to the others. Voss noticed. He didn't ask. Mika, she just nodded, like we'd all made the same decision hours ago, and none of us said it aloud. It's strange what a single bullet means after you've run out of reasons to fight. It's not defiance, not survival. It's mercy, but not for me, for the ones who'd have to watch. This trench doesn't move anymore. Time has grown thick, like we're walking through syrup. Not just slowed, distorted. I've watched Maker blink, and the movement stretches for seconds. I hear Voss breathing, and the sound comes before the rise of his chest. Cause and effect are untied. We're walking through the warp of consequence now, and the shot in my rifle is the last anchor I have to linear thought. I used to carry ammo like it was gold, polished, counted, stocked. Each last cell or stub round was a lifeline. Now, I stare at that single round like it's a sentence, not a weapon, not a choice, a final punctuation at the end of a war that no longer obeys reality. They say every guardsman reaches a point when they save a bullet for themselves. We all joked about it, called it the Emperor's mercy, a laugh, a nod, a cynical smirk. But no one talks about when that moment actually arrives, when the only voice left in your head is the calm one that says, "You've done enough. This doesn't get better." Don't let the warp take what's left of you. I could write my whole story on the casing of that bullet, the names, the cities, the people I failed, and it still wouldn't be enough space, because the guilt isn't in words anymore. It's in the weight, the impossible mass of everything I carried too long, of every cry I ignored, every glance I couldn't return. Voss asked me last night, if the Emperor stood in front of you right now, what would you say? I didn't answer, because what would I say? Why did you leave us? Why didn't you look? Was this what you wanted? The real answer is silence, because nothing I say would change the fact that I'm ready to put this bullet in my own mouth and let it speak louder than prayer. We're walking now, still moving, one step then the next, but it's different. Each step is more symbolic than practical. We're not going anywhere. We're witnessing the end. There's a crater ahead, old blast pattern, glassified earth and twisted metal. Inside it, a face, not a body. A face, just floating there, in the dust, eyes closed, mouth open. Mika stared too long, started whispering to it. No words, just sound. Familiar, rhythmic sound, like she remembered this person, but we never saw him before. I ask her what she said. She shakes her head. Didn't say anything. He was whispering to me. I look down, no lips moving, but I can feel it too. A pulse in my molars, a hum in the back of my mind saying, let go. This isn't yours anymore. You've walked far enough. I reach for the rifle, fingers on the grip, feel the metal, cool, smooth. The shot is there, waiting. It's not panic, it's not fear, it's calm. The calm that comes when you finally accept that the war doesn't end with victory. It ends with stillness. Voss falls behind, I turn back. He's kneeling, hands in the dirt, mumbling. I kneel with him. His hands are open, and he's holding ash, but it's not falling through his fingers. It's rising, lifting, curling, forming shapes, letters, words I recognize. You will forget this, over and over, formed in the ash. I look up. The sky is gone, just static, grey, roiling clouds like liquid stone. The sun has no direction anymore. Time is losing shape, and the bullet in my hand suddenly feels hot. Mika asks me, do you think if we die here, it'll matter? I don't answer, because I've stopped believing in the idea of mattering. In this place, death isn't an end, it's a migration. The trench is wider now. A fork appears. One path lined with bodies, stacked neat like wall bricks. The other empty, but the dirt breathes, actually breathes, expands, contracts, like lungs beneath the soil. Voss steps toward the empty path. I step forward. Mika hesitates. What if this is the choice? I nod. But I already know this isn't a choice. Not really, because the bullet in my rifle has been waiting for this moment. My hand shakes, not from fear, from release, the kind you feel when you lay something heavy down after carrying it too long. I look at the others and I say, we've been dead for hours. This bullet isn't for me. It's to stop what's inside me from walking any further. I raise the rifle, feel the click, finger on trigger. I stare into the breathing ground, and just as I pull, Mika shouts, not words, just sound. Sound strong enough to pull my finger back. She grabs my wrist, eyes wide, and she says, don't give it to the trench. I freeze, and the trench laughs. A sound without tone, mocking us for believing the bullet was ours to use. It, wants the final moment to belong to it. I eject the magazine, pull the bullet out, hold it in my palm, and I bury it in the breathing dirt. I whisper, you don't get this, you don't get me. The earth shudders. A moan rises from the stone. The face in the crater twists, and I swear, it smiles. The trench accepts my refusal, but it marks me. I feel it, a scar in my memory that will never close. Even if I live, even if I leave this place, I'll carry the echo of that one unused shot, and it will scream every time I step forward. The bullet is gone, but the weight is not. We move on, together, step by step, toward the last hour. And I know, one of us won't make it, but it won't be by our own hand, not anymore. I was running before I knew I'd started. Mud thrashed under my boots, slick with blood and burnt oil. The trench wall blurred beside me, a smeared painting of horror. I could hear my own breath, sharp and frantic in the rebreather, but louder than that, louder than the artillery, louder than the screaming, was my name, not shouted, not cried, spoken, whispered, from everywhere, from nowhere. Mekrin. I turned, but there was no one there, except there I was, me, standing where I'd been 5 seconds ago. Same flak armor, same scars, same bolt scratch across the helmet, even the chipped teeth. I tilted his head at me. You were supposed to die here, he said. Then he pulled the pin on his grenade. I dove. The world ripped open behind me, but I didn't die. Sergeant Doran pulled me out of the crater minutes later. At least, I thought it was Doran. He didn't speak, just stared at me, face hollowed like he'd forgotten what a person was. His eyes weren't focused. They flickered slightly, left to right, like he was watching a screen behind my skull. He lifted my hand and pressed my own dog tags into it. There were 2 sets, both mine. We have to get to the fallback point, I rasped. He said nothing, but he followed. We stumbled over bodies that bled steam. The trench smelled of dead breath and ionized rot. Some corpses had no uniforms, just skin burned with regimental sigils. Others wore my face. Some had no faces at all, just voids, like holes punched in memory. A voice crackled through the Vox link embedded in my jaw. All units retreat, coordinates pinged, fallback, fallback, fallback. It was my voice. I didn't say it. I looked at Doran. He was gone. I found the fallback point by accident. A collapsed Munitorum cache marked by blood and a banner nailed into flesh. There were 5 of us left, maybe 6. I only recognized 2 by voice. Pavik, who kept giggling at nothing, and Sarno, who had tied a purity seal across his eyes to block the futures. No one mentioned the fact that I was already there. Another me, slumped against a sandbag wall. Gut opened like a flower, still warm. Sarno muttered, "You made the wrong choice." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I knew. Time folded, not like a dream, not like warp rot, like pages in a book, bending, repeating, bleeding through each other. We moved in loops. The trench reset, the crater reformed. We reached the fallback, again and again. Each time one less man. Each time I arrived sooner, until I walked in and found myself waiting. The other me smiled. "You were late," he said. "You're always late." I didn't speak. He raised his lasgun and fired. I woke up still standing, holding my own rifle. It was smoking. No one was around me, but something wet dripped from my chest plate. Not blood, ink, thick, black and alive. It coiled around my fingers and began to spell words across my armor. Your death already happened. I scraped at it with my knife, but the metal gave way. My armor was paper. The flak vest curled, burned, faded. I was naked beneath it, naked and bleeding from a wound I'd never received, but remembered dying from. A voice behind me. You never left the trench, Mekrin. I turned. There I was again, but older. Eyes sunken, skin waxen, uniform yellowed with rot. I stepped closer, spoke softly. You're the echo. You're the copy. You're the footnote at the end of the orders. He reached into my chest, not through it, into it. His hand vanished into me like smoke into cloth. I felt everything, every death, every moment, the last round, the shrapnel, the void, the fire, the scream I never got to finish. He pulled his hand out, holding a dog tag. Mine. You can stop now. I dropped my rifle. I fell to my knees. The trench was quiet. A blue flare arced overhead. It landed just outside the perimeter and sizzled in the mud. That's when I saw it. A body. Mine. Face frozen in pain. Eyes open. Mouth slack. The exact pose I died in 6 hours ago. Pavik appeared beside me, laughing again, laughing too hard. You finally saw it, eh? Took you long enough. Welcome to the moment, the last moment. He was covered in mirror shards, sewn into his jacket. Each piece reflected me, every angle, every version. I saw myself die. I saw myself watch me die. I saw myself pull the trigger. I saw myself smile. And in one shard, I saw myself walk away. That's the one, Pavik grinned. That version wins. I reached out, touched the shard. It shattered. Now the trench is empty. The shells don't fall here anymore. They never did, because we were already dead. Only the memory loops, only the whisper remains. You were supposed to die here, and I did, again and again and again, until I stopped asking why. No alarms, no shelling, no more time. We didn't hear the last hour begin. We didn't even feel it. It simply was, like breath drawn into lungs you didn't know still worked. But something had changed. There was no more countdown, not in the Vox feed, not in our heads, not even in the sky. The sun had vanished hours ago, and with it went the meaning of day, and still, we waited. I was standing in the trench, hands empty, staring at the others, but they weren't others anymore. They were all me. Some wore expressions I hadn't made yet. Some had injuries I hadn't received. One stared at me with a face I recognized from the mirror I smashed this morning. He blinked at me. You're catching up. Then he fell over, head first into the mud, and sank like water. It wasn't just the trench that was changing. The earth pulsed. The walls beat like ribs, shifting in and out. Pipes along the support beams writhed like veins. The laser gun I held was now bone. Its charge pack glowed with something that breathed. I turned to Sergeant Doran. At least I thought it was him. His eyes were missing, soot pools in hollow sockets. He was muttering something over and over. The hour is now. The hour is now. We've been dying for days. We've been dead for years. Behind him, the banner of the regiment slumped in silence. It had rotted clean through. The Aquila had no head. We advanced without orders. There were no officers left, no Voxman, no command, only the whisper, only that soft, terrible voice, too low for the ears but too loud for the mind. Keep walking, you're almost there. The trench didn't end. It just folded, turned back on itself, spiraled like a snake eating its own failure. Every time I blinked, the path twisted. At one point, I stepped over my own corpse. 5 minutes later, I was holding its hand. I no longer bled when cut. I coughed up salt. I tasted my own name in the back of my throat. Mekrin, Mekrin, Mekrin. I think it was Sarno who screamed. He pointed upward, but there was no sky, only a mouth where the heavens should be. Teeth the size of fortress spires, a tongue of stars. It was chewing the light, and from that mouth, a single sound dripped into us. Now. I fell, or maybe rose. It was the same direction now. Up was down. Memory was hallucination. My heartbeat was not my own. Around me, the trench peeled open like a wound. Every soldier left. Every reflection, every echo, every version of us was drawn upward, sucked screaming into that mouth. And through the noise I saw us. A vision. All of us, the 913th, still sitting in the trench 6 hours ago. Huddled, cold, waiting. still thinking we had time, still thinking help was coming, still thinking death was a thing with a beginning and an end. But we were wrong. I landed in the bunker, or what was left of it. A coffin of rebar and prayer scrolls, my old bunk, my pack, my rations, everything untouched. Hour 0. The chrono clicked over. No explosions, no chaos, just silence, a stillness that screamed, and then the Vox crackled. 913th confirmed lost, no survivors. But I was still breathing, wasn't I? I looked down. My body was gone. Only my boots remained, turned to ash. I stood on the edge of nothing. The world below was folded paper. Every hill, every trench, every corpse, drawn in ink. A book, a story, our story. It had already been written, even the ending. I reached for the page and saw a note in the margin. They were already dead when the story began. I awoke, in my bunk, in my armor. 6 hours to go. The siren began to blare again. Prepare for engagement. Contact in 6 hours. And then, I remembered everything. The loop, the echo, the death. I ran to Doran, to Pavik, to Sarno. We have to leave. We already died here. They stared at me, just like they had the first time. Empty, blinking, not understanding, because it was starting again. Now I sit here, back in the trench, back at the beginning, writing these words in blood and grease on the inside of my helmet. You're reading this now, aren't you? You must be. You made it to the last hour. Tell them, tell anyone. We weren't heroes, we weren't martyrs. We were meat thrown at the mouth of oblivion and told to make it blink, but we saw what waited behind the shellfire and what waits for you. So if you find this message, if you feel the ground pulsing under your boots, if you hear your own voice over the Vox before you've spoken, then run. Don't wait for the order, because hour 0 never ends. And we were already dead before you leave the trench. If this story haunted you, if you felt the horror press against your chest like the weight of a lasgun barrel, then subscribe to Voidborn Terror's horror stories. Because the Imperium doesn't just forget you, it makes sure you forget yourself. And we're just getting started. Subscribe, share this with another guardsman, turn on notifications before the next war begins.